People really want to win the big pots and they don't put as much effort into the smaller ones, especially at low stakes and then bleeding in those spots is because they're not as emotionally invested because there's not as much money in the pot.
So how do we fix it? Today, we will be chatting with 23-year-old US online high-stakes cash game player Armin Amini, better known as AbsoluteTopUp or Real Man Red Hole Online.
My mindset whenever I sit down on a table is this money is as good as gone. I set my expectations high, but I'm aware of what can easily happen.
How do you deal with the in the moment, I made a mistake, I'm not quite where I need to be, to changing that to I can learn from this and move on?
Kind of had this exact experience while the championship was going on. I bet a hand and got shoved on the turn and I made a pretty big fold. Right after, I kind of like just thought about it and I'm like, my thought process in that hand was just wrong. This is a mistake that like, if I want to be in contention to be the best, that I can't be making a mistake like that. And that's something that moving forward, I won't.
What makes a player like Linus or someone tougher to play against than maybe your average opponent?
It feels like he's always betting. So I feel like I always have to, you know, have a decision against him, right? I don't get to have a street off sometimes like, oh, please check. But no, he just bets.
What would you say is the most important lesson poker has taught you?
If I work really hard at something for long enough, it's almost like, you know, the 10,000 hour rule. Work at something hard, efficiently, like correctly, and stay consistent with it, you will get results. It's inevitable. That's the number one thing. Like, that's the best habit to have, I feel like, is marking any hand you have like a question about. Like, I mark hands that are less than 5 big blinds. That's something that I encourage students, friends, all the above. Kind of wanted to touch on is, like you said, maybe should I network or something? That's something that I wasn't really good with at all. If you're not good at networking, be friends with someone who is. All right? You say I'm stoic, but physically I don't look stoic according to my friends. Like, I look like I'm tilted.
Thank you guys for tuning in to what's going to be another great episode of the Mechanics of Poker podcast. Quick announcement, we have seats open for our Mechanics of Poker coaching program. If you want to work with me and Adam and have us help you make more progress in your poker career, you can apply using the link down below or go over to mechanicsofpoker.com. Without further ado, guys, enjoy this episode. Armin, I first came across your name rating the recent Cash Game World Championship, which for our audience listening was a cash game event hosted by Coinpoker, in which they opened rake-free 5100 tables, which attracted the best of the best, battling it out day in and day out for who would be crowned the champion of online 6-max no-limit hold'em cash games. Big established names showed up, think your Linuses, David Jones, J-Sam, Barak, Muniz, etc., but also some new and less established names that came and played to make a name for themselves. In our questionnaire, Armin, you described participating and in the first few weeks even leading this event as one of the high points in your career. And while you're no stranger to battling, having played a fair amount over at ACR, 5100 against the best of the best must have been a big step up for you. In this podcast today, we will cover how you got there. But first, I want to dive in here. What kind of motivated you to participate in this event?
So I guess initially I wasn't really sure whether I was going to play or not. So I was kind of mulling it over. You know, so I kind of like put one foot in and I'm like, I might play. So I joined the Discord and without like, you know, full intentions of playing. I was like, I might. And then, you know, I just like thought it over. I like looked at my results in reg battling over the years and 5K now. Like, you know, 5K ACR is not all that different than a lot of the lineups that I played in the Cash Game World Championship. Maybe it was a little bit softer, but, you know, I joined thinking, you know, I have an edge or some type of edge. And that if I just keep my head on straight, I might be able to do well.
When entering the Discord and looking at the names, were you going in with like, there's maybe a couple of guys, maybe I'll lean back a little bit, see. I remember in the beginning, for example, the first day, Linus was in there like 24/7. I can imagine that you're like, maybe wait it out to see if I can get a better spot here and there.
You know, that's the benefit of living in America. You know, the time zones are a bit different. So, like, naturally, I didn't have to play against him as much. But he was on for very long sessions. So, you know, I still ran into him quite a bit.
Did you have any expectations or goals starting in?
I always set my expectations like very high. So, I went in there trying to win and at least placing very well. So, yeah, that's what I was expecting, and I got close to what I was expecting. So I can't complain too much.
Yeah, you actually had a dream start. Why don't you
Yeah.
take us back? You were like, okay, I'll just start playing and see how it goes, and then suddenly 2 weeks in, you're actually leading the damn thing.
Yeah, no, it was going really well for me. I was running well. All my marginal bluffs were just getting through. A lot of them on the show table, so it was kind of like a highlight reel for a little bit. So I was having a great time, and I was like, I felt like on top of the world essentially. So, uh, very exciting, very entertaining. Dopamine levels were very high.
You mentioned already the show tables. How was that like added element? Did you felt yeah? How did you experience that?
Well, it didn't really change the way I played. I just played the same, but getting it through and showing it was it was little bit of a different feeling. And it's just like, oh, I just got that bluff through, and it was pretty sick. I just world starred that guy. It's like, what's going on in my head? So yeah, I definitely got excited whenever I got a tank full on a show table.
Yeah, people railing for the people railing and people commenting. It was definitely great to have these show tables. Um, I can also imagine that it's a bit easier, I guess, to get result oriented. Let's say you make a fold, or especially when you make a fold and the guy shows a bluff. The fuck should I really have folded? It
I
obviously
feel good.
depends on the hand that's being showed, right? If the hand's pretty out of line, you're like fuck. Did you ever have like maybe a little bit of level in your head, like, ooh, I've been showing all these bluffs, or did that anytime cross your mind?
I don't think so. Maybe just a little bit. I mean, there was like hands where I'm like, oh, I think I made a mistake. Yeah, but I think there was one big one. Other than that, yeah, like the rest of them could have gone either way. So I don't beat myself too much, too hard on some of the folds I made or some of the calls.
Then actually on you said dopamine was high, but then I believe it was day 15. The game humbles you and sends you down to fifth, I believe, after having a 110k losing session.
Oh yeah, I had some really bad sessions. I think for like a week straight, I had sessions where I got on, I instantly lost 5 buy-ins, and I slowly lose a few more after that. So I think there was at least 3 sessions where I got on and I lost like 80 to 90k in the first 2-3 hours. And then the one you mentioned, I didn't really climb out of, but the ones after had pretty much the same exact start as that one, and then I just played like 8 hours and then clawed my way back to even or like down 10 or up 10, something negligible. So it was like a bit of a grind in the middle.
How does that like affect your mental game and your confidence going in? Because obviously if you have quote quote your normal grind, the swings are normal, it's part of it. But I can imagine that there might be, obviously, you're confident going in. I think everyone that participated is confident about the game, thinks they have an edge. But I can imagine that if you go on a big downer, and you look at the tables and they're basically all established names, did any doubt creep in at some point when you went on a big downswing? Like, oh fuck.
Mm, Man, not really. I kind of just went into it thinking, it's very, very likely or possible that I just lose 20 buy-ins or 30 buy-ins and I'm in the hole. So like when my mindset whenever I sit down on the table is this money is as good as gone. So I just go in there with well, I set my expectations high, but I'm aware of what can easily happen.
Yeah, but you
So
try to
try to take a
you try to focus
realistic.
on the good things that can happen instead of the bad things that can happen. But you already accepted that if worst case scenario happens, it's okay.
Yeah, it's like I mean, it happens. What can you do? It's poker.
Looking back at the event, how do you feel about it overall? Any takeaways?
Honestly, I kind of just learned that I'm still maturing as a poker player.
What
So,
made you what evidence pointed out?
just variance hitting you. Like, your play isn't always going to be your best. So like, I try to play my best every time. I think I do a pretty good job of it. But when sessions get hard and it feels like there's a lot of pressure on you because you keep on just losing pots, you're always in like a losing position. It feels like for stretches, trying not to unravel during those stretches is it's not as easy as you might initially think, right? So
I don't
I
think
think
it's easy at all. So
no, definitely not.
any kind of habits that you have that you go back to make sure you stay sane?
Um, you know, sometimes I wouldn't play as long of sessions, so I just like end my session and try not to overdo it, right? Live to fight another day. That's kind of like my go-to. Don't try too hard to just get out of the hole, because that's one thing that I've probably done in the past a lot, and honestly that's something for stretches in the challenge is something I was doing. I like mentioned I was playing 8-hour sessions trying to get out of the hole. Me saying this is like the exact opposite of what I'm preaching. So
What are like signs that you're trying too much? What are like when do you know like, ooh, I mean, it's maybe time to just quit?
perhaps doing stuff that's just super marginal a bit more than I should. Like, it's a low frequency play, but I want to do it this time because if it works, I'm even.
Yeah,
Getting
I
over
can
the hump.
definitely relate to this one. I'm sure a lot of the audience can relate to this one. Yeah, I mean, it's when you're down, you just look up the variance a little bit, a little bit
You want
more.
to try to increase the variance and get unstuck. But as of like late, I've done a pretty good job of, staying, keeping my head on straight, staying in line, understanding that I can't win every pot, and I just have to concede sometimes. And it's the hardest to do that whenever you're on a downswing. For sure.
You know, like obviously it's called the world championship, right? And we're gonna crown a winner. He's gonna be the champion. How much do the results of this challenge indicate who is currently the best at 6 max in your opinion? So basically, I'm asking, is Owen indeed the GOAT, right?
Yes. I think it leads you in the right direction, right? So it gives you a good idea of what's going on. There's always going to be variance, but I think, there's reasonable confidence in, these players played a lot of hands at the top. So although there's variance, it gives you an idea of like, okay, this player is doing pretty well. I mean, there was players in the challenge that did very poorly, but I think they were really good players. And, I saw a lot of the showdowns, and a lot of them were show tables too. So I'm like, oh, this guy is running terrible. So maybe the results don't indicate how bad he's doing, or like how good he is.
Yeah, because if we purely base it off result, right? I think the bottom three, top of my head, C Lama, I think ended last. Then you had T. Duttweiler and Jason Gill, which all three. Yeah, if you before the challenge asked me who would be in top 10, I would have probably put them in the top 10. So
Yeah, no, some of them definitely ran bad. I was on the opposite end of some of their downswings.
it's yeah. I mean, it's really hard to do, in my opinion, and that's just part of poker, right? And kind of dealing with that on the long term kind of shows who's going to be the best. So I guess while obviously it's great and it will give some sort of indication, it's also really like form of this moment. For example, also, how important do you feel it is, especially for maybe less established guys who join the challenge, to in the beginning, have things at least not go, or to in the beginning have things go their way a little bit. I can imagine that, some people in the beginning are just like, okay, I'm going to try it out a couple sessions, see how it goes. And if you straight away get beaten 50 buys, you're like, okay, maybe I'm out.
That could have been me.
How important do you think it is to in the beginning, catch at least some heat?
Well, if you're on the fence, it's definitely important. See, I was kind of on the fence, right? So if I ran bad, I might have ended up stopping. I might have not ended up playing as much as I did. So I was fortunate to run good in the beginning.
Who beside Owens stood out to you in terms of giving you a tough time?
A tough time. Well, that was the first time I put in decent volume versus Linus, and pretty exhausting playing him for several hours, I'd say. He was very tough to play against.
What
But
makes
stood
him,
out,
or
is
maybe
what
we can
you
also make it a bit more general, right? What makes a player like Linus or someone at the tougher to play against than maybe your average opponent?
It just feels like he's always betting. So I feel like I always have to, have a decision against him, right? I don't get to have a streak off sometimes, like, oh, please check. But no, he just bets. So
So you're always, so basically it's aggression, what you're saying?
yeah, the more aggressive, the more exhausting, because the more you have to think.
True, and especially obviously, but sometimes it can also just be over the top the other way, right? Where it's just like, well, this guy is just out of line, but he does seem to balance it, or not there necessarily. He keeps you guessing.
Yeah, for some reason he's always betting, but he's somehow always in line. It's
That's
always
when you know.
reasonable.
That's when you know someone is
That's when
doing
you know
something.
it's getting difficult.
Yeah, it's like probably like range construction on a whole nother level, and thinking about runouts and board textures in a different way. You definitely don't shy away from competition, right? That's why you also joins the challenge. Have you always been this competitive, even maybe prior to poker?
Prior to poker, I mean, yes, I've been competitive, but to this level, maybe not. I would say when I played games like, Call of Duty, basketball, soccer, I was very competitive, but I ended up like dropping those things after a few years, or, after a while, like I outgrew it or something like that. But with poker, I pretty much stuck to it. There's been times where I've like fallen in and out of love with the game, but right now I'm, very much passionate about it again. So yeah, I'm very competitive.
What is it about poker that kept you interesting compared to like the other games you just mentioned?
Probably like the idea that, it's definitely possible to be at the top. I think it's definitely very possible, because like basketball, I mean, I'm not very tall, so that got, cut off in high school essentially when I stopped growing towards the end of high school. And soccer, I pretty much played like 7, 8 years, maybe a little more, but I pretty much cut it off when I started going to middle school and high school.
And in terms of Call of Duty, I guess it's a bit more accessible regardless of your height or your physical
Yeah.
capabilities.
I'd say I was more competitive at that than I was at the other things.
So you would say actually poker is, or at least success in poker is more attainable than, for example, success in sports?
Yeah, I would say so.
You mentioned that, you go through phases where you fall in love or out of love with poker. What do you do when you fall out of love with poker to get back into, to get that fire going again?
Man, that's a tough question. I would say for me, um, having those results to go along with it definitely helped. So in the beginning, just constantly leveling up in a sense. Like, I'm started at NL10, now I'm at NL25. So like getting that jump gives, great motivation to keep on going. So essentially when you start hitting plateaus, it kind of, you lose that feeling of moving up, and it kind of forces you away from the game. So you kind of need to keep on setting new like stepping stones to like kind of keep on going up. So I'd say I kind of fell out of love with the game probably at somewhere around mid 2023, I'd say. And that is essentially when I broke routine. So that meant, studying. I was studying very often. I was marking 30 to 40 hands a session, not reviewing all of them, but reviewing most of them. And, working really hard. And then when I fell out of love with the game, I just stopped studying it like completely, right? So took a while to kind of reignite that flame, I guess. I said like around a little over a year, I didn't study at all. And I kind of coasted, right? Like I was like, okay, I'm doing well, I'm winning, but I don't think I really care to get better right now. So I just played for a while. I'd play mass tables, like 10 tables at a time, just autopilot, and get off without studying. So that's what I was doing for a while. And to get out of that, I kind of just decided I need to get my shit together. I started studying again about in October.
What made you care again?
Kind of just like sitting there being like, I'm satisfied with what's going on, but I could do so much better. I'm like kind of like letting myself down. So I'm like, all right, that's enough of this, silliness. I gotta start working hard again.
Were you also like frustrated with like the play that you were showing? You were capable of more?
Yeah, a little bit. I think so. I think that was a part of it. Like, yeah, like I'm sitting here, I'm doing okay, I'm doing good, but for me, I could do I could do better. I always set my expectations high, and I kind of lost sight of that for a while. So, I'm trying to get back on the horse.
I mean, that was in October, so I guess then hearing about the challenge came in a good time, I guess.
Yeah, so it was really convenient because I started cutting down my tables. Now I only play like 6 tables maximum, and studying as much as I can, as much as I can tolerate. Because I was really passionate about studying a few years ago because there's a lot more to learn. And, there's still a lot to learn, but it's much more obscure than before. So now, I study and try to take away what I can. But I've started doing that in October, and then the results were coming back really well. I think I had a pretty big upswing since the start of October on whatever I basically played. And then about a week and a half before the challenge, Llama's like, hey, we're gathering all these high stakes players. Are you interested? And I'm like, maybe. And then he invited me to the group.
What did you? Because sometimes when you go through a stretch where, or at least sounds like where you were playing like your C game, B game, it actually is also a good opportunity that it shows like the parts of your game that you can actually still improve in. What did you learn during the period of, slacking off a little bit, autopiloting? What did you learn about your game that now has significantly improved?
So basically, I kind of did like a mini database analysis of just my recent results. And I'm like, oh, these stats are not what I want them to be. And, like maybe I'd like front load my aggression because, I'm playing 10 tables. I'm not thinking too in-depthly about a hand. So maybe like, more protecting, maybe more check raising.
More, yeah, I can definitely see with the protecting and check. Yeah, I can exactly understand what you mean. Actually, I saw, I think, a video the other day of, I think it was Phil Gelfand, that said also along the kinds of lazy, or I think he called it power. That was like a reminder for himself that he played poker with power. And what he kind of meant with that is also like, indeed, like the lazy bets, he called them lazy protection bets. Like, just to prevent another street from happening, and then you have to think, it's like, so I can definitely relate. Also interesting what you said, that in the period before you were marking 30, 40 hands, not necessarily to review them all, but it at least shows that when you're playing that you're curious, right? Because something triggered like, oh, interesting, I mark. Oh, interesting, I mark. And I personally find poker the most fulfilling when you're indeed striving for a bigger goal. Because then you're like, oh, wait, let's say this cash game world championship, okay, I'm trying to beat this guy. How can I beat this guy? And then your mind goes into all type of, tries to find solutions. You become curious again. And that's when poker becomes most enjoyable. And it sounds like that's really the same for you.
Yeah, 100%.
So what are your goals now?
Not to break routine, that's for sure. I got to keep on studying because, playing the Cash Game World Championship, I said I kind of learned a few things about my game, more things I could work on. So I kind of did like a self-review after and during. So I kind of have a good idea of what I want to work on.
Yeah, I can also imagine if you jump in against the best of the best, the weakness of your game will definitely, you know, come to
You're
surface,
tested
right?
a lot more often. So, when you're tested a lot more often, there's holes that uh come along.
Did you notice maybe I can imagine that after a championship like that, if you then go back to the quote unquote normal grind, it's easy. And that's I guess also what you're pointing out, where with like, listen, I gotta stay on top of my routines, because I can imagine it can be, you also said, dopamine was, every day you have a really a necessity, right, to show up in your best form because you're playing at this level. Like, did you notice a little dip off when you now go back to like your normal games? It's like, oh, nah,
Definitely a bit less engaging.
got a round with the boys again, round two.
Yeah, yeah. I need to, I guess, find that fire again because after the challenge, I haven't played as much.
Yeah, I can. So how would you try to refine the fire going forward? I guess it's easy because like in the championship, the challenge comes from the opposition. But I guess if the opposition doesn't challenge you, how can you find that challenge within yourself?
Open high stakes runs because playing high stakes the end goal is to make money, right? Well, no, I guess to make money and to be the best player you can be, but money is a good part of it. So I really like high stakes to run, but it doesn't run too often.
To be fair, probably all the guys in the challenge now kind of feel this way. So
Yeah, but
I can imagine.
I don't have to battle all the time, right? You just give me a little bit of a break. Because game selection's never been my strong suit. I've always pretty much battled.
Do you think that contributed a lot to? I mean, you rose up very fast, uh, right? I think like only within a couple of years you're already playing high stakes. You think not shying away from tough opponents helped or contributed a lot to that?
Yeah, no, I had to. Because, like I said, like when you're playing tougher opponents, you're constantly getting tested. So that definitely helped me because marking, 30, 40 hands a session uh, and getting tested together definitely increased the speed in which I got to where I am.
You mentioned already earlier that you played soccer, basketball, and Call of Duty. From I think what you told me prior to starting the recording, through Call of Duty is where you got into touch with poker, correct?
Yeah, without Call of Duty, I would have never played poker.
How were those two linked?
So I played Call of Duty with this guy. His username is Tricoblast. Mainly plays Pot Limit Omaha now on American sites. But we played Call of Duty together. We would like play for like, $5, $10, $25 at a time, play these tournaments against other players. And, not making much money, but, enjoying ourselves. And eventually like he started playing poker professionally and he kind of introduced it to me. And I was like, oh, this is pretty fun. Like he knew I like watched the high stakes poker. There's Ivy, Dwan, all those guys playing, and he knew I enjoyed those. We talk about that occasionally, and then eventually he started showing me that he was playing poker and that he was doing pretty well. He was playing like he was dabbling into like 3K, 5K CR at points, but game selecting good lineups.
What were your expectations and goals going in? I guess you just started to play a little bit more poker. He definitely gave you insight into, oh wow, there's definitely money in this. Was that one of your motivators, or it was just purely
Not
like, oh,
really,
fun
no, I
game,
just
let's
played it
go?
because I thought it was fun. I didn't really think of it as like, a profitable thing at the end of the day. Like maybe I could win some money, but I didn't really think of it like as a job or anything. I was in school. That was like my main focus, but I'd do it because it was fun.
I believe. How long did it take you for poker to take up more time than your studies?
Not long, honestly. Like because of COVID, I basically got into poker a little bit after COVID started. So we were basically on lockdown. I had my first year of college online, and honestly, that might have been the reason because a lot of my classes were online, so I would just show up to class. Class would be over, and then I'm already on my computer, so I hopped on poker. And because of COVID, this was when I was playing like, I guess 50 NL. I would play like 8 hours a day, and that was really helpful to getting better.
Where did you like go for information? Did your friend help you out in terms of getting started, strategies? How did you first come across like strategies that you were implementing, or you were just winging it, or you had some previous experience?
This is a good one. So he gave me like $100, said, "I'll stake you. You can play poker." So without that, I don't think I actually would have played. I don't think I would. I didn't have money. I was my parents had money, but I didn't have anything. I just had a computer. So he staked me, and then I'd send him hands that I had questions about, and we kind of discuss them. And he is notorious for never using a solver, so we would kind of just brain solve stuff together. And I would ask him questions because I barely knew what a c-bet was. So he would basically tell me everything he knew and tried to guide me in the right direction.
Do you recall something that really stood out to you that was like a really big deal for you in terms of how you were approaching poker back then?
Honestly, I was very unorganized back then, so I would say no. I would just say, okay, I'm not winning right now, but I know I can. And that was really it. And he'd be telling me like, oh, you're on the right track. Your thought process is going, like, it's improving, and like I know you can do it. So he was a big believer in me, and that kind of drove me a bit. Like him like saying, I think he when I was playing 50 and now he said, I think you can be better than me. And I'm like, oh, really? And that kind of like was like, okay, that was like encouraging. That motivated me a bit more. Like, oh, I can get better. I have room to improve.
So basically what you're saying is you didn't go to like, I mean, there's so much training material out there, coaching available, but you just discuss some hands with him. And other than that, you were really, I guess then you were really engaged while playing in terms of really trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have outside knowledge other than the thoughts going inside my head and the thoughts that he would kind of give me. So it was all pretty much a brain solver for a long time. I don't even think I knew what a solver was back then. I didn't even know they were a thing.
I saw a post on your Twitter, aka X, I guess I should say nowadays. Posted, I think it was the summer of 2021, where he said 200 blitz, which 2 months later was corrected by 500 NL zone, is where boys turn into men. What changed as Amir went from a boy poker player to a man, and how did the 200 L blitz and later 500 L zone grind catalyze this change?
So hopefully, I think I'll try to remember this the best I can. So Trico back then, he was staking me. He was like, try to play in games with fish, right? And which is a very smart thing to say to someone who's not very good and who's trying to learn how to play. Because playing in tough games isn't going to win me money. Or get me, it might get me a little better, but it's definitely like plateauing me as far as results go. So I was never really that good at game selecting, but I would try because he'd encourage me to / force me to because he was staking me. So that was then, and I think eventually I got off stake and just started playing 200 blitz on my own because I mainly was playing untracked sites, and I wanted to play tracked sites because I knew it was getting a graph, getting statistics is like good for my improvement, and I think that's eventually when I started dabbling with solvers.
So then you started using solver. Was that due to like facing tougher opposition in like what was it did those pools kind of raise the necessity that you're like maybe I should try to see what's up? Maybe like what was the catalyst to using solvers?
I kind of just thought that up to that point, not having ever used a solver, I was doing like I think I was like winning small on like 500 NL on American sites, and that was nice and all, but that's not very inspiring results for someone who's trying to become as good of a poker player as possible. And I knew that not using a solver would really limit my game. So I kind of just said, all right. And I also, got to the point where I was eventually like disagreeing about hands with my coach, right? So I was like, all right, I'm gonna try to do this thing on my own.
You felt like you were, at some point the student kind of outshines the master. You learned what you got, and you were like, no, I need to surpass this level.
I didn't think I surpassed the master at that point, but I did think that if I want to surpass the master, I think I need a different approach.
So you opened the solver.
Yeah, and I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah, I was gonna say but on the other side, like from the outside looking in, I mean, if you just manage to just with like his advice and you just start playing and you manage to get to that level, I would almost be afraid that the solver would then destroy your, let's just call it, natural talent for the game. And I've heard many of these stories, right, that people are actually doing well and that kind of solvers destroyed them in a way because it's all about a matter of how to interpret the information. How was that experience for you?
It kind of did destroy it in a sense. Well, not I guess did, but whenever I started using a solver, I hit plateau for months, or I even went down a bit, and I wasn't doing as well, right? So it took a while. It's a pretty big learning curve, honestly. Just opening a solver and starting to try to apply strategies that the solver is recommending.
What did you stop doing that was actually making you win? Because, like I said, that was that would have been my concern.
I was probably doing a lot more marginal stuff, lot more marginal aggression, or yeah, I think mainly that, honestly. Like cool solver plays because the solver did it.
You were intuitively just way more aggressive, and when you started to look at the solver, you kind of played nice.
I think I was probably intuitively more passive because not using a solver at all. I think I was I think I was on the more passive side while moving up, and then like opening up a solver and saying, "Wow, this is way more aggressive than me. I have to be more aggressive." That's not enough. You gotta take it in a more you gotta think of it in a more sophisticated way than just, oh, I need to be more aggressive.
True, but I would say being aggressive yourself, I would say is if I look into a student and if he's at least naturally aggressive, I feel like it's easier to work with that than someone who's naturally passive. But you were also being aggressive versus aggression, so you're still starting to station people and looking people up way too light, stuff like that.
Yeah, I probably wasn't doing it correctly, right? So I was I was trying to fight their aggression with my aggression, which isn't always the best thing to do. So like I kind of said that I kind of destroyed my game in a sense. Like, yeah, I kind of like tore my game down to build it back up, but the teardown process wasn't very smooth.
What made you continue?
You know, I wasn't getting the results I wanted, but I got to a point where I like realized I think I'm getting better, even though I wasn't getting the results. So like maybe it was like 3 months, 4 months, but throughout that 4 month period, for the first like 2 months, and I'm like, I'm definitely getting better. I know I'm getting better. Like maybe I was delusional, but I really thought I was getting better and that I was in the right direction. I was going on the right path. So I kept on going, and then eventually I saw results.
What did your coach say? Like, dude, I told you, man, these solvers suck.
He'd say like some plays are cool, but like some plays are like, oh, nope, I don't think the solver's right on that one. And he could be right about some of those plays. Like I can't remember what exactly, but there's definitely times where the solver isn't the best thing to do. The solver's action isn't the best one to take versus who you're playing against. So
do you remember what clicked for you that made your game change and your results go in the right direction?
Getting like, I guess I got to the point where I was understanding concepts and applying them really well, rather than just having an idea of what I needed to do, right? So like a lot of the time it's not a specific spot, but like you kind of get a spot thrown in front of you in game, and you don't really know what the solver does, but you have all these like pieces from the puzzle, and you're trying to put them together. Like, all right, there's this heuristic that kind of works with this similar type of texture that I think, like, the equity, the hand strength, the blockers and unblockers, they kind of like all work together to kind of give me an idea of what I need to do. So like all the small things that I've slowly learned with a solver through like, a lot of error kind of came together, and it kind of all had, they were all like getting together cohesively.
Was there like one, you mentioned the pieces of the puzzle, was there like one critical piece or a heuristic that for you was like a big aha moment? Like, now I get it.
I think the main one is like understanding when blockers and unblockers are relevant, because they're not going to be a lot of the time, but most of the time they are. I think a lot of the time blockers and unblockers are the most important thing in poker.
Interesting, because you hear really mixed advice on this. You would say that, so you would say that in the beginning you were not enough blocker and unblocker oriented, and then when you started to take that a bit more serious, that's for you when things really started to change around? Or do you think thinking more in terms of the properties of your hand kind of naturally resulted in your frequencies overall being better? Was it more like a guideline for knowing, for getting closer to the right frequencies?
So like kind of tying back to like the pieces of the puzzle, it's like blockers and unblockers kind of work together with hand properties a lot of the time. So like, yeah, I think a lot of the time your hand properties are like the number one thing you want to focus on, and then build your range around those properties. And your blockers and unblockers, maybe it depends on suit, maybe it depends on what the other opponent's actual range looks like, kind of influence your range construction as a whole. So while I might say blockers and unblockers, I think what I really mean is range construction, and I think that helps me with range construction a lot of the time.
Yeah, so you now had pieces, so you now knew how to construct your ranges. That's basically what you were
Like I had
saying.
all these pieces, but they weren't really working together, and then eventually I got them working together. So now my range construction naturally fixed itself.
And you started to understand like why certain hands go where and what they're achieving, and then at some point also, like, you don't have to study all the notes anymore, right? Because in the end it all comes back to kind of the same core principles.
Yeah, a good way of putting it is like exploit is like hand versus range, and then solver is like range versus range, and finding a good balance between the two. And that was probably the hardest part for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how long did it take you to get that to work properly?
So I said it took like 3 to 4 months to kind of like understand and like implement solver strategies. So probably like another 3 to 4 months on top of that, while I'm on this upswing, I'm also putting it together. So like maybe I hadn't put it together all the way. Maybe I needed some luck to push me in the right direction. But during that stretch, I kind of put it together.
You're still studying at the time as well on the side?
During that upswing, like during that
Yeah.
2022 or 2023, I don't remember. Yeah, tirelessly. Like, I was still, I think basically since 500 NL to now, even when I like said I fell out of I fell out of love with the game, I was still marking 30 to 40, 20 to 40, 30 to 40 hands a session. I was marking so much. It's like a habit. Like even if I'm not studying them, I'm marking them. So I know what I need to look at eventually.
When for you was like the turnaround point that you were like, okay, fuck college poker? Because like you didn't really set out to become a professional. When did it become inevitable that you're like, well, I have no other choice to become a professional now?
That's a good one. I basically dragged my feet on that one for a long time. So I was waiting till I had very good results. So I think I was in the sophomore year of college, or maybe it was towards the end of sophomore year, beginning of junior year. I had a very, very big upswing, and I was basically got to the point where I was shot taking 10K and L, and I was like, all right, I just had a really good year. I think college is taking up too much of my time, and I think this is way more productive. So I basically decided that's enough college for now.
How did your environment respond to that? You know, usually you can get mixed responses.
The parents weren't happy. They're very traditional. So they couldn't say no because of the results. I gave them results. If I didn't have the results, they would have been pretty upset. But they came around to it pretty quickly.
Big shout out to our sponsors. First off, Coinpoker. Coinpoker is one of the fastest growing poker rooms in the world right now. In a world where sites seem to care less and less about the players, Coinpoker is showing good promise, listening to the community, and providing a safe and sustainable playing environment going forward. Join the action, get 33% rate back and 150% deposit bonus using code TMOP, or register using the link in the description down below. Next is GTO Wizard. If you are a frequent listener of this podcast, you know that 90% of our guests use solvers to get ahead in the game, and GTO Wizard is by far the most accessible tool if you want to use GTO to get ahead as well.
We are proud to announce a technological breakthrough. Introducing GTO Wizard AI. This powerful technology can solve any custom poker spot in seconds to high accuracy. Unlike pre-solved solutions, this allows you to edit the solving parameters. That means you can modify the ranges, change the stack and pot sizes, customize the betting tree, and automatically simplify and optimize your bet sizes. Brace yourself. The meta is about to change.
So sign up using the link down below, gtowizard.com/mechanics. Get 10% off your first month. Enjoy the weekly coaching webinars, of which one every month is with me. Looking forward to educating you guys over there. But without further ado, let's continue today's episode with Armin. Adam, what in your opinion are some things that people have to take into consideration before saying college goodbye and pursuing a career in poker?
That's a tough transition moment for anybody. I think if you're quitting college or studies, you need to be pretty confident that you're going to stick at it with poker, because you're going into a kind of linear direction. And if you say no to studies and all the opportunities that come that way, you're kind of making a big bet on yourself. And you've got to realize you're in for a rude awakening, let's call it, in terms of the reality of being a poker player. I really like the way Armin did it, because he waited till results got to a certain point. It's like, I have undeniable evidence that this is going to be a good opportunity. Let's go for it. So yeah, I think if you're unsure, you're still going through a transition phase, maybe playing it safe and kind of combining the two, studies with poker, build some evidence with yourself that you've got confidence in it. And then, to be honest, you probably just need to trial poker for a period of time to see if the full-time lifestyle is for you. I know myself, I love playing poker with friends. And then when we finished university, two of my friends were like, should we go to Thailand and get a grind house for 3 months? And the 3 months was an experiment. Either we love doing this full time, or we're like, get back to the real world. I want some structure. I want to do my own thing. So it's really hard to know until you try that, like a full immersive experience, and just go in there with an open mind. So yeah, a lot of things to consider, but I would play with caution and get to a point where you feel like it's worth dropping out, because dropping out of studies, then re-engaging with studies is not going to be an easy move. A lot of people will want to finish their studies before they transition. But yeah, it's definitely a personal thing to think through. You guys covered so many topics there, and you covered out the journey. And I was really curious to know when you got to 500 zone. I know it sounds from the journey, there's lots of rebuilding during this phase and trial and error of figuring out how to beat those games. Solvers came to the front for the first time, and you're rebalancing a lot of things strategy-wise. You also lost half your bankroll during this phase as well, which is a really brutal thing to experience from a mindset perspective. So I'd like to take us back to that moment and how you handled that big swing of losing half your bankroll.
I think I was pretty upset. And, that kind of nudged me into being more conservative as a whole with bankroll management. And, having more than, 40 buy-ins when I shot take a stake. So I make sure I have 60 to 70 when I'm shot taking. And that honestly probably influenced why it took me so long to leave college, because losing half of what you have is not sustainable if I want to leave college to become a poker player full time. So yeah, I ended up being much more conservative with how I wanted to rise up the stakes. So yeah, that was a big influencer in how I approached poker as a career.
How did you experience that downswing? Did it lead to any self-doubt? It sounds like you're generally someone who backs themselves, has a lot of confidence. Did that moment in time create a little bit of a reflective moment or a bit of doubt in yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was like, I might not be cut out for this. I don't think I might not be able to be that good at poker, because I've been working really hard, but I'm not really figuring it out. I'm still making like, I'd review my hands and I'm like, yo, this is pretty terrible. I'm just punting, and I'm not sure how to turn this situation into like a winning one.
How did
It
you
just
use
felt
that
like,
self-doubt in a constructive way? I know self-doubt's one of those feelings we all go through, and I always find it interesting how certain people deal with that. Some people kind of wallow in it a little bit and let it kind of steep and it kind of builds. Other people hate that feeling so much, it almost drives them to learn, to study, to improve. So when you were feeling that self-doubt, how was that impacting you day to day?
so it definitely motivated me to keep on working, but I kind of like went into it thinking like, I might not be able to figure this out. Like I'm kind of hitting a plateau. I'm not sure whether I can figure out if I can get better. And like, that's when like, maybe I should look into like other ways of learning other than, just trying to figure it out myself, because, that's essentially like what I wanted to do is, all right, one of my friends recommended, hey, why don't you try to go get private coaching from somebody, and I'm like, I think I'm just going to keep on trying myself, which honestly, now like being a coach in a CFP and hearing that, like, I'm like, oh, like this person can help themselves out a lot by opening themselves up to other people's opinions. So maybe that was a leak back in the day.
Do you think that was ego, trying to figure out everything out yourself?
Yes. 100%. You could always use some help. Bounce ideas off of people, get different opinions. You're not always going to be right.
Yeah, and obviously you're a smart guy, and you will be able to solve a lot of your problems. And it's sometimes trying to figure out when inputs could help you in that process, and not trying to get a go through it alone always. For you, did you have a plan B at this phase when you're going through this downswing? Did any thoughts crop into your mind of returning to your studies or normal life?
Yeah, no, I thought that, maybe I should just focus on school. But whenever I would win in poker, I enjoyed it so much that I kind of didn't let myself get away from it. And, I just kept on trying and then it eventually worked out for me.
So you said you learned lessons about bankroll management during this period. What other lessons did you learn about yourself?
That maybe my mental game isn't as strong as I thought it was, but I've never like I get asked mental game questions from students, and I tell them I'm not the one to ask, because whenever I'm not feeling great, I just still play for the most part. I don't take very big breaks. I think the biggest break I took was like 2 weeks during a stretch at like 200 NL, and then I've just been playing almost nonstop since.
You say you're not the one to ask, but you're the exact person to ask, because you're able to feel what other people feel, but override it. So you're able to practically apply a strong mindset, even when you don't particularly feel strong, which I think's much more beneficial than talking about theory. So for you, when you make yourself keep playing during bad patches, maybe sometimes we can talk about the downside of that. How do you get yourself to keep showing up? What's the kind of inner dialogue that you use to make yourself be there?
I'd maybe delusion. I I just keep on playing, thinking I could win. I see what's happening, but I can figure this out. No more mistakes. I just keep on playing. Maybe I'm a little tilted, but let's keep on going. I'm one like, at least I like to think maybe I'm delusional, but when I'm tilted, if I'm tilted, it doesn't hurt my play that much to drop me from like an A to like a C. maybe it's like an A to a B minus, which hopefully, I can keep on playing. And that's what I've just been doing. And I guess that's what works for me is like, I guess one problem I had was not cutting off my sessions when they're going long. It's not going well. I'm definitely frustrated and agitated. Uh, I had a friend stay with me for like a month, and he would occasionally walk in my room, and I'm having this bad session. I'm just pacing, like I'm rocking back and forth in my chair, like just frustrated out of my mind. And he's just sitting there walking in, just laughing, like, "Are you good?" And I'm like, no. And then I just keep on playing.
So there's no
So
quit in you, for sure. And we can see, I guess,
usually no,
resilience.
yeah, usually no.
A lot of resilience. And yeah, it's like all character traits. There's a positive side of them, and there's a lot of positives from yours, but there's also a side where it can get detrimental and almost like a bit of self-sabotaging. So for you, I want to know, when you are playing your B game, that's kind of B minus, you mentioned you don't have as big of a drop-off. How are you experiencing playing compared to when you're in a more calm state of mind? What's this kind of B minus game? What's the experience of your B minus game as you're living it and playing it?
I'm definitely less emotional. I try not to be, but it's almost impossible to not just be stoic the whole time. I try my best to be stoic, but there's going to be sessions where, the emotions creep in. But when, like you said, everything's going like fine and I'm level-headed, each decision just becomes its own and doesn't get affected by previous ones. So, which is, well, in non-information wise, like I'm speaking emotionally, I guess.
Yeah, I think when we get emotional, we start keeping a story in our head. Events start linking together, things start getting personal, things start creating a bit of meaning that maybe wasn't there, and we lose a little bit of that abstract thinking of what's going on here. So when you are feeling these emotions, how does that generally affect your game? Does it lead you to seek spots, like more aggressive spots, as you mentioned, to Rene, a bit more higher variance when you're trying to get out of the hole? How do those, in that patch of your career, how do those emotions affect your game?
It's interesting. It's actually like changed as my career's gone on. I think originally it was like I'd turn into like more of a passive and I'd bleed, but now it's not so clear that, right? So now like I could have passive stretches, and now like I could just have over aggressive stretches where I'm punting a bit. But yeah, it's not. It's like now it's like a mix. Now it's not just passive, like, because I think originally I kind of like approach poker passively and learning different ways of being aggressive, kind of honing in on having a well-constructed aggressive strategy, because being aggressive is the number one thing in poker. So yeah, it's a more balanced, but doesn't necessarily mean it's perfect.
Yeah. So when you say you don't have a strong mindset, where do you feel like you've got weaknesses there? Is it this maybe inability to stop yourself playing, that kind of compulsive, I need to keep going? Or where do you feel like you've got weakness in that department?
I don't think I live to fight another day as much as I should. And I think like there's points where I'm like, all right, I don't have to play anymore today. I should just cut it off. And I've done it more than I have in the past, but I still think that's a weakness. I think a lot of my leaks actually are, I guess, what's the way of putting it? Like staying like clean in game, right? Or like not losing focus. I think if you ask people who know me for a long time, I just wouldn't read the board correctly. I'd miss a 4-line to a straight. So that was actually a big problem of mine. I've still made that mistake. I think I probably made that mistake in the challenge at least once. So
yeah, you mentioned to Rene in the challenge, one of the things you were most concerned about is, could you keep your head straight? And I guess this links into that. Can you kind of stay balanced, live to fight another day? When you're not thinking that way, is it just based on you want results now? You think quite short term? Would you say your lens of thinking about results, thinking about performance, you get a bit sucked into the current narrative?
yes, absolutely. Like I start thinking short term. One thing that actually helps is like clicking on your graph and then just doing all dates, zooming all the way out, and it kind of calms you down a bit.
Surprisingly effective, that. Yeah, it's like a perspective skill, because we do zoom in a lot, and especially results, they generally get us to zoom in on a day or a short period of time. And that zooming out is the exact thing our mind needs to do as well. Kind of zoom out from the short-term narrative that we're living in and to go, there's a bigger picture. All right, actually, my year looks great. So yeah, I think it's a constant reminder. I think some of us naturally gravitate towards a more short-term lens of life, and some can naturally zoom out more. So yeah, you got to kind of figure out where you're at and kind of find that corrector so you're not too narrow focused or too zoomed out. This links into what you mentioned about your enjoyment of poker, and you like leveling up. Obviously, you've progressed a lot of levels in a short period of time, but you mentioned having new stepping stones. So for you, what have been some stepping stones? Obviously, we can talk about moving up actual levels, but what are some stepping stones, like short-term metrics or things you engage your mind on, which keep you motivated to want to keep pushing and keep going for that next goal?
Well, nowadays it's fixing like statistics, it's fixing statistical things. Like, oh, I might be lacking in this area, so maybe I could go restudy something because I've kind of not necessarily unraveled, but I kind of like my mind's become a bit muddied when it comes to like this part of my game. So now it's a bit more like detailed than before. It's like, oh, it's a bit more general whenever your leaks are bigger, I guess. So like as I play more and more poker, my leaks get smaller. They become much more distinct, specific. So I guess that's what it is. And well, that's for improvement, I guess. But like as far as goals go, like I don't really play 20K all that much, so maybe I could play more, right? So I guess that's the next stepping stone. Maybe I just placed 10th this year in the Cash Game World Championship. Hopefully I do better than that next time they host it. So, and the only way to actually, well, there's no way of guaranteeing it, but to throw myself in the right direction, got to keep on plugging my leaks.
It's interesting because like as you climb the ladder, as you mentioned, it's first like the things are quite broad. There's lots of things to fix, but as you get better and better, now it's smaller things and the details matter more and more. But you've always got to create something to strive towards, something to push towards. I think you mentioned to Rene that there was a point where you were maybe in your comfort zone, taking things a little bit easy. So what pushes you, or what do you think allows you to want to keep getting better? I say that because a lot of people get comfortable. We get satisfied with a certain income, a certain level we're playing, and maybe don't care too much about the details or not enough. For you, it feels like there's something internally that's just, it needs more. It needs those details. It needs that extra level. So what do you think drives that to get you out of settling for your comfort zone?
I guess it's a bit of ego and hunger and like kind of like self-expectation. Like, hey, like, why are you just settling for this when you could do more? Like, for 2023, I basically just took my foot off the gas pedal and I was like, oh, I'm doing well. There's not much else I really need to do. I kind of just forgot, like in the beginning, I'm like, oh, I want to be the best player in the world. And I kind of just lost sight of that. So that's why.
Why does that matter to you?
Kind of just like proving to myself that I could stay consistent with something and keep on going. Because, we mentioned like 3 or 4 different things. We mentioned soccer, we mentioned basketball, we mentioned Call of Duty. These are all things that I kind of just walked away from or like just set aside. Like I lost interest in. And, you're not going to become the best at anything without when you set it aside. So I even did that with poker, but now I'm back. So I'm happy to keep on working hard, I guess.
Yeah, it's almost like life's led you to this point where finally you can put all your efforts into something and see how good you can get. Maybe basketball wasn't the fit, or soccer, and maybe even Call of Duty as well. And now you've realized there's some depth in trying to figure out or stick to something and really go deep. And you're taking this as like the challenge to maybe see what you're capable of on a big level. And there's a lot of internal growth here as well, but obviously there's a lot of external growth that you're experiencing. You mentioned with Rene about your high expectations and even your decision to join the Cash Game Challenge. And you said you think you have an edge in that game. So for you, where does this confidence come from? And what gives you confidence that you have an edge even when you're playing against some of the world's best players?
Well, rag battling probably most of the hands in my database. That's probably it. I rag battled so much. So although, I said I still need to mature a bit. I just thought, okay, I've played with a lot of these players quite a bit. I think I know where my spots are with some of these players, and this is with not even working hard for the last year and a half. So if I, you know, like I said, I started studying again in October. I didn't study for over a year. My only study was like coaching a student here and there. So I was like, okay, well, if I can do this not very well, but okay, without any study, what can I do if I actually put my mind to it? So I didn't want to sell myself short. I wanted to see what I could do while trying my best.
Let's take us into the mindsets of a reg battler, because you mentioned you've reg battled a lot of your career, and I feel like players have different styles of approaching poker, different overarching goals. A lot of players will mix some reg battles with game selection. Some are very good at picking games and they don't battle at all. And some, like yourself, kind of gravitate towards, let's play tough games, I'll battle anyone. So that mindset, it's quite a vulnerable mindset, because I say vulnerable, it's actually, you've got to be willing to take some hits to the face and some beatings. How do you feel like you deal with playing against good opponents? Let's talk about like maybe early in your career, now you're a bit more established. What gravitated you towards wanting to play tough opponents? Why did you not pick easier games?
Just getting better was the number one thing, and just kind of proving to myself and them that I could beat them was like the big thing, right? So I guess that kind of ties into ego. But nowadays, like, I kind of come to realize, like, okay, this is pretty mentally exhausting, like reg battling every day or most of the days you get on. So while maybe in the past I would just mindlessly do it, I think now, like, sometimes I give my mind a break and play with fish, because that's probably the most profitable thing. That's definitely the most profitable thing to do, and it's probably like good on your mind to like kind of give yourself some breathing room, right? Because when you're reg battling all the time, it's just you're kind of in the ringer, and you don't give yourself a chance to breathe.
So yeah, so it seems like the overarching goal was always to be the best you can be, and you realized playing good opponents was going to speed up that trajectory. Now you're trying to find a sweet spot of giving your mind a break sometimes and not always reg battling. But it does sound like it's been a big driver of your fast progress through the stakes. So when you play a tough lineup, let's say you're trying to prove yourself and you've got a bit of a chip on your shoulder to show you can do this, and you have some losing patches, maybe it's a losing session, maybe it's a losing week to a particular lineup. How does that affect you? Because I can see you can player like yourself might wrestle with this kind of bit of self-doubt, a bit of insecurity in those moments, and I'm curious to know how that impacts what you do next. So how do you generally deal with bad patches during these reg battles?
Well, I've had help, right? So coming up in poker, I've done it with my friends. So I had this group of friends from Call of Duty, like 6, 7 of us, and now all of us are poker players, right? All of us play poker, and I pretty much rose up the stakes being in calls with them, just shooting the shit, like having fun. Like, I'd be playing 6 tables of 2K&L, and then they'd all be debating some random obscure topic into my ear as loud as they can, and I would just play. I played in call for most of my poker career, and honestly, the last like 3 months, I finally like was like, okay, if I'm trying my best, I'm gonna play in silence, or I'm not gonna play with people like yelling in my ear or like talking in my ear, distracting me. So, that's a part of my like now new like matured approach. But that honestly helped me with downswings in the past and rough patches, because they'd be like, I'd show them hands, we'd look at hands. I get more than just my opinion, which was probably what I was doing in the beginning. So, now, like, all right, they're like, oh, this is very clearly variance. Like, what can you do? Or like, okay, you made this mistake. Like, and then I take their opinions, I value their opinions, and, I bounce their ideas off with mine and try to like, get to the best result or best decision with what I want to do next, as far as like in-game strategy goes.
Was getting inputs from those around you to balance your own thoughts so you don't get too in your head when you're losing. Sounds like a good approach.
Yeah.
From the emotional side, how do you experience emotions during these tough patches?
Self-doubt definitely creeps up, but I have great friends, and they help me with reassurance whenever I need it, and if I don't need it, let's say your ego's getting a bit to you, and they let me know, so they keep me in check, I'd say. But a lot of the time they're very are very nice when it comes to it. They don't check me too often, but maybe that's because I'm just getting better.
Yeah, maybe too good to call out now. You mentioned you always keep yourself going. You always push through things. So it sounds like whatever emotions you experience, they never leave you kind of stuck. They never leave you in this kind of disappointed, low energy, feeling sorry for yourself state. It feels like the emotions you experience, maybe the self-doubt, just drives more of a proactive approach. Because I feel like for downswings, people go in one or two directions. They either derail negatively or they go, right, I don't like this downswing. I'm going to do something proactively. It sounds like for you, you steer proactively. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've gotten a lot better at it. Self-doubt doesn't really creep up anymore. Like, we've kind of gotten to the point where, okay, we're somewhat established. We have results. And these swings are going to happen no matter what. So I think now I'm as good as I've been as far as my career goes. And I guess that's just kind of how it works. Like, the more experience you get, usually the better you will be at handling these things. So now I'm much better than before as far as self-doubt, mental game, and everything. Like, I probably had my worst session a few weeks ago, and I'm a good experience.
Awesome. So you mentioned focus earlier as well, how you've kind of come from an environment in Call of Duty where there's people speaking around you and creating lots of noise. And you mentioned like sometimes you struggle with focus early in your career. How do you stay focused now during long sessions? I'm guessing during this challenge, there was some marathon sessions you played. How do you keep focus high and distractions low during long grinds?
Honestly, the big thing is just sitting down, only focusing on poker, and not playing too many tables. That's really it. I don't think there's anything special about it. I just try to make sure, like, I think in the past, maybe I'd run a YouTube video in the background and just watch something while I play. That's a big no. Watching Netflix on the side, another big no. Stuff that I don't really recommend doing anymore.
Just singular focus seems like poker's got enough stimulus for you to get that mind in a very high focus state. Do you have any distractions, or do you have any kind of lapses in focus where you feel like your brain's malfunction a little bit, a bit of brain fog? And if you do, how do you generally address that during sessions?
I probably don't do a good job of it. I'm going to have lapses no matter what. Like, there's going to be something related to, like, I've been a big fan of MMA the last few years. Something pops up. Now I'm interested. YouTube video. Stuff like that. And what do I do to like stop that? Honestly, this is part of, like, maybe I'm not a good mental coach. I don't. I just do it anyways, but I try my best not to.
Yeah. I'm guessing they're becoming less frequent as you're getting to a higher level.
Yeah, like, I'm not opening up Twitter on the side, not opening up social medias or YouTube. I'm just like, okay, this is my poker tracker and then my tables. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good to be realistic as well. Like, you're human. There's things that attract your attention. We're not just robots who can just singular focus on one thing for 10 hours straight without a thought popping into our minds. So we've got to try to work with that limitation, but also over time, as you have, like, trend towards less distractions, trend towards more focus, and less kind of ideas pop in your head that you engage in.
I feel like focus has been one of my bigger leaks throughout my career. So,
would you say it's still a leak, or do you feel like you've mainly addressed that?
It's less of a leak. It's a minor
Anything
leak,
you're working on there to make it even less of a leak again, or do you feel like, anything you do?
Maybe like a child lock on Google Chrome. Something like that.
You can do apps like Freedom, where you basically go into your browser in Chrome and you type the hours that you want it to be locked offline for, and it basically won't let you go on during certain hours. Yeah, it's interesting when we're in such a world of stimulation and things that want our attention, things that we're curious about. We often need to be quite mindful of designing our environments and create a few like kind of safe locks around what do I kind of gravitate towards? Can I just block that during these kind of hours so I can focus to make it easy for myself. It's the same with like diets. A lot of people have fridges or cupboards full of unhealthy snacks. It's like, okay, you already lost the game because when you're hungry, you're going to open the fridge, you lose. So it's like trying to create your environment around the goals you're trying to achieve. And yeah, there's often some things you can do there. I want to talk about dealing with financial swings because I think your story is very interesting in this regard. You mentioned when you first started, you didn't even have $100, and the only reason you did start is because your friend gave you $100. Now you're losing $100,000 in a session, and we're probably 3-4 years apart. So for you, how do you, on a mental level, deal with losing such vast amounts of money? Are you not attached to the money? Do you see it as buy-ins? Yeah, just talk us through like how you're kind of interpreting the swings that you're experiencing.
I just assumed that I'll win it back eventually. So I just know it's gone, but it can't be gone for that long if I stay disciplined. So it sucks like while it happens, but honestly, my biggest losing days have not even been the most frustrating. Usually the biggest losing days happen very quickly. So yeah, I think I lost, I don't know how recent it was, but I think I lost like 80,000 in like 30 minutes. And then I was like, well, that happened quickly, and I just lost them in the most standard way possible. I'm like, well, couldn't do anything. See you tomorrow. Is basically what I said to myself. So
yeah, all of these things you're noting are really strong mindsets in terms of ways of outlooks of looking at stuff. You mentioned not worrying about losing because you'll get it back eventually. That's awesome because now you're not bothered about a short-term swing. And it sounds like for you when things are out of your control, you don't take too much attention to it. I'm guessing you're probably a little bit harder on yourself when you're making mistakes than you are when just losing through variance.
Yeah, I would agree. That's how I am.
You mentioned you tag a lot of hands. Does that help you to feel like you're working on your mistakes in game?
Yeah, no, that's the number one thing. Like that's the best habit to have. I feel like is marking any hand you have like a question about, or like I mark hands like my exact hand I might have played correctly. Like I might know that I'm playing this hand correctly, but there's questions about my range, about flop, turn, or river, and then I mark it. Like it's something as small as that. I mean, if it checks down to the river, like I mark hands that are less than 5 big blinds, or like 6 big blinds. So that's something that I encourage students, friends, all the above. I encourage it to everyone. Like if you have any small part of a hand that you are suspicious about, mark it.
Is this something you consciously do, or is just curiosity so high that you naturally do this?
I do it unconsciously. Like it's just a habit. It was in the beginning, I made a very strong effort to do this because I'm like, okay, I have a lot of leaks, and the only way to figure them out is by marking as much as I can. And like now it's like, okay, mark. I wasn't sure about this part of my range. I mark it. Like it's kind of second nature now. It's like a habit. If I go to my poker tracker, there's so many hands that are marked.
That's interesting because you at first made a conscious effort and now it's automatic. I think that's a good reminder because I was wondering for you, some people just are so curious. Like they almost can't stop themselves from marking stuff because they need to know. And I thought that could be the case for you. Maybe that is true now, but it doesn't always start that way. So anyone listening who hasn't got that curiosity, make it a habit, like instill intentionality towards marking stuff. And then over time, it becomes a kind of habit on autopilot. So mistakes are always very interesting. I think it's good to go a bit deeper into this because on one end, your ego gets damaged. You're like, damn, made a mistake, not quite good enough. But on another side, it opens up another opportunity vehicle to learn, to get better, and to improve. So for you, how have you wrestled with making mistakes, kind of hitting the ego a bit, and I'm not good enough, especially now you're in the Coinpoker World Championships, some of these showdowns gets shown to a big audience. How do you deal with the in the moment, I made a mistake, I'm not quite where I need to be, to changing that to I can learn from this and move on?
You know, I kind of had this exact experience while the championship was going on. I bet a hand and got shoved on the turn, and I made a pretty big fold. And then, like, right after, I kind of, like, just thought about it, and I'm like, my thought process in that hand was just wrong. Like, and then I like, this could have been biased. So then I go study the hand, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a mistake that, like, if I want to be in contention to be the best, that I can't be making a mistake like that. And that's something that moving forward, I won't, because I studied it. I understood where I went wrong in my thought process, and I kind of fixed it.
You learn the lesson that you need to learn. It sounds like the pain of that error helped you to move forwards. So in terms of correcting thought processes that go wrong in game, for you, is studying with the solver your kind of go-to, or talking with friends? How do you kind of address that? I know something's not quite right with my thought process, and I want to recalibrate that.
It's like usually when I study, I just do it on my own at a random time. I don't really have a set time per day that I study. I just pull it up every once in a while, or like every few days, and I run through all my hands. And I'm thinking about, okay, why I was thinking this way, but for what reason, right? I kind of like try to reanalyze each part of my thought process and what I thought was going on with my range, with what was going on with the hand. And I kind of just like poke holes in it and try to patch them up with new thoughts and new ideas. And whichever new ideas I like the most, I go with.
When you say poke holes, do you mean kind of challenge your ideas, challenge the
Wait.
thoughts you're having with a
Yeah,
counter
you kind of have
idea?
to play devil's advocate with yourself. If you're studying with yourself, you kind of have to play a devil's advocate. Like, all right, I think this is right, but what if this is the actual right approach? And then I try my best to find a way for the other thing to work. And if I can't, then I go with that, with my original thought. But if I can, then, there's no point in going with the original thought, right? Because if I found a reason to say this other reason's better, or this other direction is the best one to take.
Where did you learn that skill of questioning your ideas and stress testing stuff? Because I feel like it's not an intuitive way to do things. We often like to be right. We have something called confirmation bias, which we like to be smart. It's actually quite hard to challenge, just to really keep stress testing all our thoughts from the opposite side. So where did you learn to do that, or is it something you've naturally always done?
So I think in the beginning I said that, all right, I'm going to try to do this on my own. And when you're trying to do it on your own, you make a lot of mistakes. And then as time goes on, you kind of like remember, okay, I made a mistake here for this reason. And that's always in the back of my head is, okay, I was wrong. And why was I wrong? Right. And figuring out why you were wrong is like the most important part of it. So you're not wrong again for the same reason. So like trying not to make the same mistake twice. So I guess that's why. And, if I don't want to try to make the same mistake twice, I really need to be, I need to speculate against like my original thought process sometimes. And, sometimes that leads to issues with, okay, now I really need to ask somebody because I'm not certain. So sometimes I'm close on something and I run it by somebody else and try to get their thought process. But, well, yeah, I try to do that more nowadays.
Does it give you a good feeling when you realize why you've been wrong in a certain situation and then you can correct that?
I guess it gives like a feeling of like reassurance. Like, okay, I figured this out. It's not a question mark anymore, right? So now like I'm not in the unknown.
Then how do you go to implement that strategy in game? I think a lot of players, they lose a little bit of confidence in this approach because they'll learn new things and then in game the same thought pattern reoccurs and they go back to the old default. And then now they're like, I've already learned this. Why can't I just execute this strategy that I now know? It seems like for you, things stick quite well. So how do you make sure the new things you learn are going into your game?
Well, sometimes the new things you learn, you don't even get a chance to implement them because it's so rare that it pops up. So like the number one thing that helped me while kind of moving up to high stakes with solvers and, self-study is always understanding why rather than how, rather than like, okay, this is happening. Why is it happening? Like, how is it happening? Like, how do we even reach this idea, this train of thought, this concept, this heuristic? So, I would study the solver and I would never really do it for surface level information. So I always have a reason behind what I'm doing. And that's the number one thing. That's like I guess that's the number one thing I focus on whenever I play. That's what I build my strategy around.
deeper understanding. And then once you get that, it often sticks easier because you know very deep level what the strategy is trying to do. And it's not just trying to learn a thing on the outside in terms of a certain, how I place in a hand or something.
Yeah, it's like you could understand the patterns, but if you don't understand how the patterns are made, then that's kind of a flaw. So you want to kind of know both. I feel like they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, and I guess when they do go hand in hand, it's a kind of light bulb moment, which does stick, and it's easy to implement on once you've got that understanding.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know your approach to risk taking, as you've rose through the stakes very quickly, which from the outside looking in implies you're a risk taking gambler. But from this conversation so far, I'm not getting that sense. So how have you approached risk? And I use risk in the context of using your bankroll to shot take a higher stake and take on that next opportunity with the role you have. How have you approached when to move up stakes, how much of a bankroll you need, how aggressive to be with your bankroll management throughout your career?
Well, I've always like set high expectations. Like if I wouldn't say the sky's the limit if people have been on the moon. So I think I've always been the thought that I could be good enough to win at the higher stake that is above the one that I'm currently rolled for. And, if I really wanted to play, I'd sell action or something like that.
Have you ever put yourself in a lot of financial risk through your poor decisions or moving up stakes too quickly?
Early on, yes. Nowadays, not really. Nowadays, I'm conservative-ish. Yeah, I guess I'm conservative-ish, but I think that helps when you're on the table. I think that's huge when you're on the table.
Did you ever have any fear whilst moving up stakes of potentially losing the money you've earned, even going into the Coinpoker cash game championships? Is there any sort of fear of the work I put in to build this role can be lost twice as quick at this current level?
No, I made sure I was financially like ready. I was just went into it with like the mindset that okay, like I could lose X amount pretty quickly. I think I was definitely a bit nervous whenever I was first playing 20K now. That was definitely like I had some nerves, some butterflies in my stomach whenever I was first hitting those tables. And I'm like, wow, each pot, whenever all the money's, it's 40K at the minimum. So I'm like, okay, this is pretty big. So I was definitely a bit nervous, but now I'm kind of getting used to it.
How do you internalize those nerves you feel? Do you class it as part of high stakes performance? Do you have an inner dialogue that goes with that? Or are you just in your body experiencing that?
I kind of experience it more physically than mentally. Like, oh, like I don't feel like the same right now. Like I know I'm nervous. I think, and that was in the beginning of 20K. I think I was in Toronto, on the 10th of January to the 13th, and I got called to play the VIP cash game and on Coin, and it was very swingy because it was like 10K NL, 20K buy-in, and I think there was an ante. I think there was an ante, yeah, and I think I lost 100K pot. That was probably the biggest pot I've ever lost, but I was in good spirits, mainly because of that mindset I went in there with. So that was probably the biggest pot I've lost, and I felt okay because Coin has really big time banks, so I pretty much did the best I could to make the right decision. And I even, as soon as I lost the pot, I'm just doing combo counting in my head, doing everything in my power to like figure out whether I made a mistake. I was kind of searching for the mistake, right? And I'm like, I don't think I can find it. So I kind of like was like, did I just make a 100K mistake? And I kind of just came to terms with it that you can only do what you could only try your best. And it's gone now, so now I can't do anything with it or do anything about it.
I think that's the key, as you mentioned there, being in your body, like just experiencing it with the body, because that's how emotions generally work. And if we go into the mind and start thinking, oh, I feel nervous, why is this here? And start questioning it, that's when it becomes a kind of negative impact on us. But if you can just experience the feeling and go, oh, I'm human, I'm playing for 40K pots. Yes, I feel some sensations in the body. My heart's rising a bit. And just being okay with that, very often you stay in control. That's the hard part of keeping the mind out of that kind of physical sensation. But it sounds like for you, obviously it's not easy for anybody, but you've done a good job overall of being able to just allow yourself to experience stuff and keep the mind out of it for the most part, unless you go on that mistake hunting streak with the mind.
Yeah, I go mistake hunting pretty often.
Rene, for you, how do you experience those increases in adrenaline when you've played higher stakes, and how did you try to maybe keep your head from overreacting to those?
I have to say I'm definitely not at the level of Armin. It's definitely something that I've struggled with throughout all my career, and I think I contribute my success just to good management. But it's definitely not something that I am immune to, and I would say even that it's something that I'm sensitive to. But knowing that, I try to make sure, that I prepare well. But sometimes I can definitely get catch off guard, and then it can definitely overwhelm me. So I would say it's definitely something that I still struggle with, but it's something that can be managed. So maybe for audience also listening, like, oh, I don't feel as stoic as Armin. Oh, apparently Rene also has some issues there. There's things that you can do to manage it, so it doesn't hinder your sessions as much. At least.
You say I'm stoic, but physically I don't look stoic, according to my friends. Like, I look like I'm tilted.
Yeah. What is the difference here, Adam, from your perspective?
The difference is like what the mind's doing rather than what the body's doing, and how in control the mind feels. So if the mind is overreacting to the sensations and going, oh, I can't handle this, I don't like this, that's quickly going to derail performance. If you're kind of scattered and full of energy internally, but the mind's like, right, I'm going to get this guy, I want to take this guy out. You've got all this energy from the outside, you're thrashing around and you're rocking, but you're like locked in, and your mind's not worried about the sensations and trying to create a story around it. You're just in your body. It's high energy.
You don't freak out because of the emotions. It's just like you're experiencing it, and you can manage it. You can hold it in there, and it's all good.
Exactly. You're riding the roller coaster of emotion. If you look at elite performers in sports, I think people get the wrong interpretation of what they're experiencing internally. A lot of them be hyperactive, super engaged, super focused, but in their bodies, they'll be almost like tingling with sensations at times, but they're in control. They don't feel out their depth. That they've internalized this is high performance. This is what it feels like. I'm in control. And the mind's the main key. Like the experience of the body could be the same, but if the mind freaks out or the mind feels in control, will be the differentiator.
Yeah, I remember I was doing quite some reading up on this topic because I was struggling with this as well. And a lot of it was interpretation of the signals. So let's say your heart started reading or you started to get sweaty. Like it's just a matter of how you interpret that. Oh, I'm freaking out, or like, oh, nice, my body is preparing for battle. That's actually a rephrase that I started to use at some point. It's like, oh, why? Apparently, I'm realizing this is important. Nice, my body, because I remember, let's say, for example, you get a bit of a dry mouth, or this physical experiences. It's literally your body getting ready because it's like, hey, listen, this is currently not important. Let's focus all our energy onto something else. So at some point I reinterpreted it as like, oh nice, my body's getting ready because it's important. Let's go. All my energy is going to this decision. But yeah, if you don't, it can definitely start freaking you out. I wanted to actually touch on something, Armin, that you were talking about with Adam. I don't recall it exactly, so help me out here. You guys were talking about solvers, and you said the words "get it to work." I think you were stress testing like some sort of ideas. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that? What you mean and how does the process look of getting it to work? I think you were playing devil's advocate with yourself and you're kind of testing out your ideas.
Yeah, so, a lot of the time I take what I feel like is happening at the tables and I just throw it in the solver and I start node locking. So I have my initial thoughts, I have the counter strategy to those thoughts, and then I kind of stress test them both, and then I go with what I think is the most realistic to what I can do to win in practice.
So basically, you let's say you made a play, and in order for that play to be correct, in order to get that play to work, if I understood it correctly, you have to change some things. But if there's too much, if basically if you cannot get it to work, it probably the other road was the better.
Yeah.
Is that how I should interpret this?
I think that's fair. I think I did less of that with specific hands and more with like range. I think I've definitely had hands where I made a marginal play and I do some no locking to see that, okay, is this within reason? And a lot of the time it actually isn't. But there's times where it is. So I kind of go into it with trying to make my play not be the right play. Because like if you can make
Oh,
your
wait,
play
that's
not
actually very interesting because a lot
yeah.
of people actually think they go in there with their hand and they want their hand to be played correctly, right? So they're doing kind of the opposite of what you're doing.
Well, if you make your hand, if you try to make it to where your hand's correct, you're not really learning anything.
Exactly, but most people don't really learn.
Yeah.
Things have to point that out, right?
Try to prove yourself wrong. Is the way I think about it. Yeah.
So basically, you let's say you approach a certain node from a strategy perspective in a certain way. You want to basically try to get that strategy not to work, and if you cannot get the strategy not to work, then your strategy is pretty damn protected.
Well, the way I use solvers is I try to base it off assumptions. So a lot of time my assumptions are right, but there are times where they aren't. And honestly, what I found is bouncing ideas off friends, off of other players that I have studied with. I mean, there was stretches in my career, me and Llama were study partners. I think that was probably in 2022. We studied together for months, and then we kind of grew apart. I started hanging out with my Call of Duty friends more. I think he started playing a lot more live in Vegas. So, yeah, I mean, bouncing ideas off other players is great.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, what kind of impact did opening up your game for other people's opinions have on you? For example, take this llama experience.
He's a wild guy, and he plays like a wild guy. Honestly, yeah, it opens your eyes because some players approach poker completely different than you do. So it opens my eyes to other ways of playing the same hand, which is the number one thing. Like, okay, he played this hand for X and X reason, and I would have probably not considered that as an option. And there's different ways to win in poker, 100%. And sometimes there's more than one answer. Well, I mean, a lot of the time there's more than one answer to the same question. So,
I mean, that's also, I guess, why, for example, World Championship like that runs, right? And why there's like, I don't know how many people participated, over 30 people participating, because everyone, they think they're better and they have a certain view of the game that they think is superior to the other. And let's go pedal and see
let's
see who's
see
right.
who's more right.
Exactly. And that's, I think, the beauty of poker. You also talked a little bit about using solvers, and throughout many episodes in the podcast we talked a lot about you have to understand the why, but you also emphasized a lot on the how. What is the difference between why versus how?
So, like, understanding why something does what it does is like mainly centered around concepts and heuristics, I think, and how, I guess, is setting the strategy up as a whole, and is this realistic to apply in practice? Is there ways I can simplify it? Does my opponent, let's say I did simplify this in this way, is it something my opponent can pick up on relatively easy? And can they do something about it? And if the answer is no, I'm all for it.
And then when you say can they do something about it, you go back to your previous node locking in the solver, where you're gonna kind of test your strategy, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I try to make my strategy, I guess, I don't want to give too much without hurting my chances of winning in the future. I guess setting up your strategy till there's no EV is basically the baseline, right? And that's my number one goal whenever I'm strategy building. Honestly, strategy building, I find a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed strategy games in the past and throughout my whole life. I don't think I mentioned it, but I played a lot of chess in high school and growing up. So that was one game I played a lot, and I basically substituted it with poker. So building strategies, creating new strategies in the solver is something I actually enjoy. So like there was maybe I pick out a week or two in the year, and I just make a strategy for almost every spot, and then I go with that I think is practical, and I think that will overperform, and then I'll go with it.
So I'm sure there's a lot of people in our audience listening, like, hey, this guy's talking about. I also, or they might have a GTO Wizard description, or they might look up some hands here and there. It's like, this guy's talking about using the solver in a whole other way. When you say strategy building, could you maybe give us some insight how that process looks like for you? And how it's different than just I look up a hand in the solver.
It's like I grab a pencil, like paint, and just start drawing, coloring everything. It's like, I do a lot of node locking. I think I pretty much mentioned it. Like, I guess I could base it off of heads up. I started playing a lot of heads up in the last year and a half, and my heads up game was pretty much all over the place. I didn't really have much of a plan on a lot of boards, and I pretty much, for 1 week, I hopped into the solver, and after playing and reviewing hands, I'm like, okay, now let's try to get some consistency going, right? And I hopped in the solver, like bucketed a bunch of textures, and then I looked at different strategies, and then I kind of like thought, how well do I play this one, this one, this one? Which ones overperform the most? And then I pick the one I like the most, and then I simplify it. Like, it might be simplifying to a range bet. It might be simplifying like buckets of the range, like let's say flush draws, straight draws, top pairs, second pairs, and then kind of adjusting it to where the frequency's close enough to theory that, you know, you don't lose any EV, and that it's relatively practical to apply. And I just do that for like, you know, up to around a week, and then I study it and hop in the mix.
How do you determine which one will overperform when you compare the strategies? Like, okay, I can approach this spot in various ways. How do you determine which one overperforms?
Well, you can never know for sure, but you can have a good idea. So, like I said, I was playing and I didn't really have much of an idea, but, you know, having a lot of experience with like player tendency and like six max, for example, I use some of it. Heads up's a completely different game. You see a lot of six max players just try heads up, and heads up players just like kind of classify them as fish. So there's kind of a pretty big game. It's like the difference between like, I guess, pot limit Omaha six max and Hold'em six max is, I guess it's not as big, but it's quite big. Heads up versus six max as a whole. So I kind of use player tendency, and I'm like, okay, what do I feel like they're doing? And then I just base it off that completely. It's just all feeling. There's not
so basically
any, like,
it's basically the strategy that you feel like they will. So basically, you look at the response and like, okay, do I feel like they're gonna meet this response, or they're more likely to screw up? So instead of maybe you first look at your own strategy, am I able to execute this well? And then you look at every response to every strategy, and then you look at versus which one are they most likely to screw up. So it's how you perform, how you can execute, and how they will respond. That's kind of what determines.
Yeah, I might have like had a bit of a word salad, but that's exactly what I'm saying. I look at the response and then compare.
Perfect. So then I understood that one correctly. You mentioned also in terms of making it practical and simplifying. How does that process look?
I think, you know, splitting range is very difficult, even for the best players in the world. And finding the best way to split your range in a way that you can actually do it in practice without just kind of guessing all the time. Finding the best way to do it in the most efficient way is my plan whenever I go into node locking.
And that's where kind of we talked about it earlier, certain blockers, unblockers, hand heuristics come in, where like, okay, these certain groups of flush draws, or do you have certain heuristics that make that better in the check back, make that better in the betting line?
Yeah, or even just splitting into two sizes. That's like one of the harder things to do, because if you don't do it correctly, one size is going to be exploitable, and people might, you know, take advantage of that.
Yeah, so you talked also in the questionnaire also about that you prefer simplified over complex strategies. But from what I'm hearing, like, obviously we have to then align the definition of simplified? Because some people listening, they say, hey, I also simplified my strategy. I had to c-bet 100% for 1/3 in every spot. You know, it's also a simplified strategy. But your strategy is not simple in that way. So how has your version of simple evolved? And like, what do you now consider to be simple?
So in the beginning, I think the way you just said it was my initial definition of simple. Is okay, if I'm simplifying, I'm doing something pure, like something 100%. And nowadays, I think you could kind of take it a step further. Like if you're simplifying to 100%, well, you're not really testing yourself, but you're kind of making the game practical, which I think is 100% okay. And the one downside I'd say that has is when you move up and start playing better players, which, you know, I've run into that issue. I guess it's not that big of an issue because I'm enjoying myself, I'm competing. But you can become less predictable, right? So maybe this means I'm betting bigger and I'm playing big bet in like check. Or, you know, like let's say I'm on the turn or river and I'm playing 2 sizes instead of 1. That's doable, but I want to do it to where I'm actually playing it well, right? And it takes a lot of time, I guess, but once you do it a little bit, you kind of catch on. And I make sure, all right, well, with this hand class, I'm going to do, or maybe with this type of suit, I'm going to do X action this percentage of the time. And I kind of I node lock it and see, okay, is this a fair way of looking at it? And will I be able to remember this in game? And, you know, if the answer is hopefully or probably, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this out. And if I find it too demanding in game, then, you know, I might renege on my initial decision. But yeah, I like simplifying even complex strategies. I feel like you can simplify them down. So I consider that to be still simplified, but maybe it's not as simplified as most people would say.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask, like, what do you think is a common mistake that players then make when they simplify? Because, like I said, this term has been thrown in poker quite a lot, but it's being interpreted in many different ways.
I think simplified is making it more practical to play than what theory is. Like, that's pretty general, but, you know, I guess you kind of just gauge that based on who you are as a player. Like, if this is more practical for you, I would recommend it. Like, whenever I'm studying with students or studying with friends, you know, we all have different ideas of what we want to do, right? And I think the end goal is making the solution or like the strategy you want to play as applicable as possible. And maybe that means simplifying 100%. Maybe that means simplifying most of it to where, you know, you can play it good enough. You know, maybe it's not perfect, but it's good enough to where your opponent's making more mistakes than you are. I think that's
I saw a post on your Twitter. I think it was on December 31st, 2022. You shared your first ever 100K month, and you wrote that 2022 was mind-blowing year for you, going from 500 NL with a 20K roll to playing 10K NL and recording a record win. To which someone responded, if you would share some tips as he would like to achieve the same someday. Now, I'm sure many of our audience would like to achieve the same as well. Your response to that was, study and play consistently. No secrets. Just got to put in a lot of work, right? You already shared a lot. I wanted to break that down a little bit more. And I wanted to maybe ask you if you could maybe take us through kind of a week in the life, day-to-day in the life of Armin, maybe back in 2022. What does a day-to-day in the life of Armin trying to become the best poker player look like? So maybe people can take some inspiration.
That time was not a lot of free time. So I was a full-time student back then. So I'd have like 17, 18 hours of hours of classes picked out for the semester. So that means waking up, going to class, doing my homework, and then getting on poker. And that was essentially my day. And then ordering food because I wouldn't have time to like cook or anything, nor that I didn't want to waste any energy trying to cook. So that was basically my day-to-day routine. It was very, very simple, bland, not much thought into it other than I got to get this school stuff done with so I can get back and work on poker.
How does your day-to-day look nowadays?
A lot better. So
What improvements have you made?
say that again.
What improvements have you made?
A lot better. I've done a lot more work on my health. I don't eat out as very often anymore. So I eat homemade food. I work out pretty often. I don't play as much video games, so I don't waste time. So I just waste as much time behind the computer outside of just playing poker. And just hanging out with my friends. I started taking jujitsu later last year, and I kind of stopped because I started focusing really hard on poker again. But now I'm trying to find that balance again. So now I'm about to start going again.
You mentioned in terms of studying, getting better, that stats often point you towards your leagues, and that kind of points you to which note you want to study or redesign your strategy. How did you approach it in the beginning when, like you said that now studying is a bit more, there's less to study because you have less leagues. How systematic were you in the beginning?
In the beginning, it was very muddied. Since I would be marking every hand, like almost not every hand, but I'd be marking a lot of hands. I kind of just worked on everything slowly together. So like rather than like, let's say 1, 2, 3, there's like 4 different parts of my game. Instead of one of them getting better at a time, they were all just slowly getting better together. So I didn't really have a focus on anything. I just worked on whatever I had a question about at the time, and then slowly it started coming together. I didn't really focus on statistics much back then, as I do now.
How did you improve on that process?
Well, I started looking at them. I didn't really look at my statistics much at all. I just would look at like the win rate, right? And then like I'm like, okay, well, there's better ways to do this. I probably didn't study in the most efficient way while moving up the stakes, so I probably could have saved myself a lot of time and effort. But now I have a good idea of what stats need to look like, and when stats are off and why they're off. Sometimes there's context. So now I kind of like, let's say I set up a Google sheet with stats, and then I kind of like color code it, like red being really bad, like dark red being bad, light red being slightly bad, green being good. Now I kind of do that, and that's kind of how I've been working with students as well.
Do you set then like certain stat goals, and then let's say, for example, okay, my current numbers are off. Let's reevaluate and let's go out and play. This is the spots that I have to focus on. Reevaluate next month to see, if they improved, something like that.
Yeah, that's what I did at the start of October, and I've been like working on it, putting added emphasis on it when I'm playing on these spots, and that is honestly really helpful, and it kind of helps you more than you think.
I think what that really does, it helps you focus on something different than the actual results at the tables, because you have something else to evaluate on. Oh, I was trying to improve on this spot, so you evaluate your session. How did it go based on, did you focus on these spots? Did you improve in that, right? And then you kind of let go of the result because they don't really matter, because you're there to improve your game, right? And I think it also helps you show up to your sessions a bit more engaged. Do you also do something before you play, like a pre-session? Do you run over like your focus points or something along those lines?
Honestly, no. I just get on and play.
It's already top of your mind. Like, oh yeah, these are the spots. You don't have to kind of remind yourself.
Yeah, like I just have that focus in my mind, and then I go play, and then I analyze it later.
But you also mentioned that you got into coaching. I was wondering what led you to get into coaching, because from what I understood from your story, you never really did. I mean, you had coaching all the way in the beginning. Did that actually kind of trigger you to also want to do coaching yourself?
I guess there were times where I've been unproductive, like in my free time. So I would occasionally like do some private coaching with students. And as of recent times, like now coaching in the CFP, I guess it's trying to just be more productive with my day as a whole. So, give myself less free time to just waste. Because, wasting time during your days, while you're doing it, you don't really think about it. But, let's say the next day or at the end of the night, you're like, oh, I could have done something better with that part of my day. So,
So it
I
gives,
might be
gives you a
taking
lot
up.
of satisfaction.
Yeah, did you say addition by subtraction?
No, it gives you a lot of satisfaction.
Oh, well, both.
Both.
I take away
Uh,
time of potentially being unproductive with something that's always going to be productive.
Actually, I'm definitely guilty of that with certain things myself. In your observation of coaching students, you already mentioned that nowadays you have a good idea of what the stats are supposed to look like. What are some common leaks that you see in students and that maybe our audience has as well? Maybe both in common stats that are off and why they're off, but also in terms of their thought processes, right? Because that was something that you were really focusing on as well, like some common leaks that you see in that area as well.
People really want to win the big pots and they don't put as much effort into the smaller ones. That's what I would say.
But this is the most common theme.
Yeah, the most common spots are the smaller ones, and if you don't, and that's why people end up, especially at low stakes, and then bleeding in those spots is because they're not as emotionally invested because there's not as much money in the pot.
So how do we fix it?
You gotta just put all your focus, well, not all, but most of your focus into the smaller pots, and a lot of the time it's being too passive in the smaller pots, just letting yourself get ran over, and whether it's through denying equity to the person that's betting, whether it's to just betting thinner for value, betting more often, or protecting and just check raising, for example, protecting all parts of your range versus bets, keeping your opponent guessing, not letting them just do their own game, play their own game. You kind of want to dictate what's going on, especially in the small pots.
Adam, maybe from a mental game performance perspective, what are the most common leaks you see in students you coach, and probably then our audience listening as well?
I think at a lower level, it's all about dealing with variance, as Armin's been mentioning, just being able to abstract how you're playing from the results themselves, not worrying that you're losing, thinking it's going to come back later, dealing with mistakes as a whole in terms of the ego getting damaged by that, and not finding ways to channel that kind of self-doubt into a good learning model. Again, like Armin's been very good at. But yeah, basically dealing with the hard times. A lot of poker is challenging, especially as you're trying to build a bit of a reputation for yourself, move up stakes. You're just constantly getting hit in the face. I say hit in the face in terms of results don't go your way, variance comes, mistakes are all over the place, you don't know where to work on it. So yeah, I think just building a framework for dealing with all of that. The landscape of make mistakes, the landscape of results, just being fine with all of it. Just going, bring it on. Just kind of that kind of mindset. And then as you get higher, I think higher stakes players are more performance driven. It's more focal issues. It's more lifestyle stuff. It's more overcoming Armin's addiction to want to play all the time, which is great at certain points, but can be destructive later. But yeah, I think the low hanging fruit is definitely around dealing with results and then dealing with mistakes and your kind of ego identity related to that. So for you, Armin, I want to do a little bit of reflecting, looking back. I know it's been probably feels like a really long career for you. I can picture my early 20s. They felt like a decade. So for you, your poker career probably feels a decade long. What do you think's been the greatest contributor to your success in poker?
So kind of diving into it, risk management, because in the beginning, I wasn't very good at that. And I think the best thing I did for myself was kind of take a more conservative approach as far as bankroll goes. And that helps me with aggression while playing in poker. So I might be conservative outside of poker while I'm working at the tables. It kind of allows me to kind of disconnect from that part of life. I'm just focused on poker. I don't have to worry about anything else. And I think I've always given the advice of, hey, if you're not comfortable playing, there's outside reasons for that. And, for me, it was bankroll management.
So for you, it was too reckless with your bankroll to begin with, and that was putting too much pressure on you whilst playing.
Yeah. And I'd say like having that like level of risk, like, well, there's adrenaline. It's like the wins are very high. The losses are really low. But, you know, when you are conservative with your bankroll, or like, I guess more conservative, not necessarily just being completely conservative, not shot taking at all ever. You know, it allows you to kind of have a disconnect from your emotions, as like everything seems a bit smaller and not as, you know, a loss won't be as life shattering. A win won't be like the greatest moment ever, but it'll be very nice.
Yeah, it's almost that balance point where you can handle both sides, the big wins and the big losses, and kind of keep that calm center. For you, I'm guessing the answer is going to be yes, just based on the recent conversation. But do you feel like your tolerance for risk improved as you went through your career? As you're playing higher, do you feel like you could take on more risk? So you had this kind of bit more strict bankroll management early. Do you feel like you could loosen that a little bit because your overall tolerance of risk is higher now?
Yeah, I think so. Like maybe playing like a stake that, you know, maybe I'm not properly rolled for, but I think the game's good enough. Like my understanding of how EB works, and what to expect when I hop into it definitely helps. Like just building the experience, definitely helped me with that. So like maybe I wouldn't do it as well back in the day, but now I could do the same level of risk that I would take back in the day. But now with the knowledge I have, I can handle it a little better.
Yeah, I think that's a key to can you handle it? Because it's not about the number of buy-ins, like as a kind of formula. It's more like can you handle losing those buy-ins and taking the swings and being okay with it? You said something, I think it was early in the conversation with Rene, when you mentioned when you were playing the cash game, World Championships, that the money is good as gone. It's as good as gone. I think that's a good like kind of stress test of can you handle it? Because at some point you've got to come to terms with I'm going to be on the bad side of variance. I'm going to lose X amount of buy-ins. Am I okay with it? And I think that was a good stress test of, can you handle it? Okay, well, just envision it's gone. Game over. Are you okay with it? And if it doesn't sit well with you, you feel internal discomfort, you're probably out of your depth there. So do you feel like that's kind of a stress test for you as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like assuming that the money's as good as gone is honestly like if once you lose it, you're like, well, I expected that.
Mm,
So
pre-roll.
how can I be surprised? Right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
kind of
it's
like
all
that more
like,
than like going into it like how can I lose?
yeah, it's interesting how many players really struggle with this because you say that very simply, but most players do the opposite. They'll play a higher stake, so they're playing 200s and they're going to shoot 500s. They're so invested in those first 5 or 10 buy-ins. It means so much to them. Losing's like, oh my God, because it's not just the money side, it's the self-doubt. So as you mentioned, you've overcome self-doubt with results, but when it's the money side and self-doubt intertwined, it feels hard for players. So have you got any advice for players who maybe get a bit caught up in that, a bit caught up in maybe they've got the roll. Let's say they've got the bankroll, but they're struggling to deal with the inner conflict and self-doubt that arises from these swings. Any wisdom for those players?
You know, hindsight is 2020, so I don't think it's fair for me to say this because when I was in their position, I wouldn't have given this I guess explanation. But you know, it's hard to say, you know, the graph when you like let's say you zoom out and you just look at the graph of progression, like it when you zoom all the way out, it's like this. But when you zoom in, it's like plateau, downswing, upswing, big downswing. Like it's not fair to me to say that, but like yeah, if you just expect that, okay, if I continue working hard, there's light at the end of the tunnel, then I can do this. And I just have to keep on working through like the pain and the suffering of going through a downswing and not maybe I shot take, but I lose what my stop loss was and I have to move back down. Like, you know, it's not, I guess in the short term, it's not going to be linear, but in the long term it is. And, you know, I'm saying that because I was in that position myself and I got there, or I'm still working to get there, but I'm on the right track. And now like I have that self-belief that, okay, like it might not be doing well right now. And then in this month or, you know, into the last few months, by the end of the year, I'm not even going to remember it.
Great advice. I think as well to link with that, what we've been talking about earlier, being able to experience the kind of feelings and emotions that you have and being okay with it. So say you take a shot take and you lose 10 buy-ins, you're going to feel really uncomfortable. There's going to be self-doubt. You're not going to have a nice physical sensation through the body. And a lot of people are kind of scared of that. Their mind goes into overdrive and they almost want to run away from it. So they play it safe so they don't have to go through that. Where for you, as you've mentioned in like 4 or 5 different examples, you are quite good able to just stay with the feeling, not judge it too much. You also have a confidence in yourself that you will figure things out, that you'll get to your goals over the long term. So anything short term that you need to go through is kind of just part of the experience. So I think it's another part of that. What would you say is the most important lesson poker has taught you that you've learned along the way?
Honestly, the most important lesson it's taught me is like, if I work really hard at something for long enough, like it's almost like, the 10,000 hour rule. If you work at something hard, efficiently, like correctly, you're not like just hitting a brick wall and just running into it the whole time. If you work on a skill for a very long time and stay consistent with it, you will get results. It's inevitable. And that's what it's taught me, because like before that, like before poker, I kind of just heard it, but as far as like I was concerned, it's just like, okay, that's something they said, but how can I really know it's true, right? Until you experienced it. You're like, oh, they say hard work will give you results all the time, like hard work over talent all the time. And I was like, oh, sure, you're right, but how do I know? How do I know you're right?
Yeah, that's the deep truth, right? When you have to experience it for yourself, we can hear it from someone else, we can read it, we can have inputs, but until you've had that experience, that's kind of the light bulb moment where it really becomes true understanding. So I want to come at from two different angles of this. What about the player who feels like he is working hard? Maybe he's like a volume rakeback leaderboard grinder, and he's like, yeah, well, I've been putting the work in for years, and I'm still not getting the results I want right now. So it's not the work in showing up part of it, because I feel like I'm doing that well. I'm still not getting results. What would you say to that type of player? I'm sure there's many of those listening who feels like they're putting in the work, but for whatever reason, for years the results aren't coming.
Well, it's kind of like what I was saying was like, you should always play devil's advocate to yourself. Like when you're in a situation like that, you've been at it for 2 or 3 years, but you feel like you've hit a plateau for a long time, and you feel like you're working hard, but maybe you're working hard, but you're not you're working hard, but you're not working smart, I guess. And that's when, like, if I was in a player like that's shoes, I would get other people's opinions, because maybe my devil's advocate isn't even working for myself, right? So like, I for one, like, I did most of my studying on my own, but that didn't mean I didn't ask people when I kind of hit that point where I'm like, I'm kind of all over the place right now, and I don't think I'm really making much progress. So, I kind of reach out. I'd say reach out.
I like what you said there. Maybe my devil's advocate isn't working well. That's a good kind of thing as well, because you're basically trying to solve your own problems. I think most of us are going through our life trying to achieve our goals, running obstacles and trying to solve them. It's great to be able to move past your own issues and challenges, but sometimes you hit a roadblock. And when years are going by, you need to be honest with yourself to go, I'm not solving my own problem very well here. There's a blind spot. There's something I'm hitting into or can't see. I need outside inputs. I need something else to kind of problem solve. So yeah, I like that. That kind of answers my second angle. So I'll move on to the next one.
I'm playing devil's advocate to my devil's advocate.
Yeah. Yeah, they're never in the game of always stress testing. It's always like, what's the answer? Are you right? Can we find a different angle to look at? So with that, do you feel like anyone who commits themselves, let's just use the player pool of you're already playing poker. It's not your grandma. It's someone who's familiar with poker. They can play strategy games. Do you feel if anyone applies themselves as you have in terms of effort and actions, do you feel like anyone can make it to high stakes?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. Like, hard work beats talent most of the time, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, if you work tirelessly towards something for a very long time, for years, you're gonna get some results. And if you aren't I would say very likely you made some type of mistake on the way.
Why do you feel like many players don't believe that's true? Or a different angle, why do you feel like a lot of players say they want to play high stakes, but then they get stuck along the way, and then the narrative becomes, it's too hard, it's not possible?
Well, it's really easy to get discouraged whenever you're playing poker. Like, I was lucky in a sense because, I had problems shot taking when I was trying to get up to 500. I would get shot back down more than once, but then I hit a time or like a period of just running hot, and I shot took 1K like successfully, 2K successfully, 3K successfully, 5K successfully, all in like the span of a year. So, but while that happened in a year, for 2 years leading up to that, it was just all back and forth plateau. I'm just going up and losing, and going back to the drawing board over and over again. So at some point you kind of think maybe you're going insane. Like maybe you have a little bit of mental illness that you keep on trying. Actually, I'm not sure whether I answered your question. Could you ask it again, or if I did, then we can move on. But
No, you did. I think you answered from the lens of, I was asking why players get stuck and don't believe they're moving forwards, and you touched on the point that you do get stuck for a period of time. That's part of the learning. That's part of the growth. And I feel like in life, it's really hard to keep going at something that's challenging to do physically, mentally, when you're not seeing progress, when you're not seeing results on the outside. It sounds like for you, you were able to tap into improving, getting better, working on this, being a bit over resilient or overly stubborn to not give up on it. But that's kind of needed to get you through those patches. I know myself where I get frustrated myself as well when I'm not making progress towards a goal I set, and I'm like, I want to be making progress, and I've got to re-internalize that as, this is progress. It doesn't look like progress, but I'm putting in reps right now, which in 5 years time, 2 years time, hopefully I'll see some benefits from. So yeah, I think you covered it very well from that angle.
yeah, I'd say being stubborn isn't really good for improving, but it's good for dedication, right? Heart and commitment to the game. Tony G said that, right?
Yeah. I think strong determination, I think, is we can push it too far, but it's needed. Like when life gets tough, what are you going to do? And sometimes you need to tap into something internally. It's like being good at sports, being good at poker. There's elements of it where you need to be something internally that keeps you going when others would go, this doesn't feel right, this is too hard, I don't want to do this. So yeah, I think it's a lot of players, hopefully listening, will relate to that mindset as well. So with that, what in your opinion is the most important skill or traits poker players need to develop in order to make the jump to high stakes? Let's say they're already playing low to mid stakes, they're dreaming of playing high stakes, they're watching you and go, wow, this guy did what I want to do. What would you say is important skills or traits they have to develop?
Well, the mental game is important, but I feel like I didn't really clean up my mental game till I was already like getting there, right? So I'd say maybe this isn't the best advice for some people, but mental game is the number 2 for me, maybe even 3. And the first 2 are tireless, like I guess continuing to keep on studying and reviewing your hands no matter what is kind of just like number 1. And number 2 is actually just showing up every day, like consistency. So that's I don't have anything, I guess, interesting. It's kind of just all blunt when I'm answering this question.
I love it though, because the truth often is very simple, and it's not often the quick hack, the quick fix. It's often life's hard, be consistent, keep showing up, and do that for years, and you'll get where you need to go. If you're like, yeah, but what's the shortcut? Where's the loop around here, and how do I get in from the backside? It's like, nope, it's just a straight line to through the work. So with that, any lessons you've learned along the way to be more consistent? Because I do group coaching with poker players, and every year we get together to reflect on the year. The most common theme throughout every conversation is always, these areas I wasn't as consistent as I wanted to be. It's either grinding, it's studying, showing up. So when we say showing up, very easy. Everyone knows, show up, do put the hours in. But a lot of players struggle with this. So how have you solved that problem for yourself to be more consistent?
I guess surrounding yourself with like like-minded individuals, like my friend group's like, we're like a brotherhood essentially. We've known each other for 6, 7, 8 years almost. And, you know, we all are trying to strive forward and make progress with whatever we're doing. And a lot of what we're doing is poker. So, you know, knowing there's other people that you're close with that are working hard every day, or at least trying to, you know, you are who you surround yourself with a lot of the time. So that helps me. Like knowing, seeing my friends are working towards something, I'm also working towards something. You know, you don't want to just be left out. It kind of like encourages you to keep on working.
Do you feel like without that peer group, you'd have still found ways to push yourself, drive yourself to do stuff? Do you feel like there was enough internal, or do you feel like there was a lot hinging on being around the right people and environment played a huge role?
I'm not sure. It's a hypothetical situation. Like I'm not sure whether I would have figured it out or not, or continued with the consistency that I did.
Yeah, I think it's a recurrent theme of the conversations we have with players. At some point on your journey, you find like-minded people who are also working hard towards their goal, and you get in with them, and then you, as a team, kind of move forward. And you kind of need that unless you're super self-driven. You're already, just going to drive yourself to do stuff and get better. I know for myself, I had 2 friends who were way harder working than me in my career, and they were like, "This is what it looks like to work hard." And I was like, "Okay, we do 10-hour days. This is what the standard is." Rene, I know for you as well, you had a big influence from your peer group when your team decided you guys want to be the best in the world. So for you, Rene, how did that influence your kind of career? And do you feel like without the right peer group, you would struggle? I say this because some players would be listening to this going, all right, well, you guys keep saying right peer group, right people around you, but I'm a lone wolf right now and I want to be successful. So do I just go networking before I begin? Or how do I move forward from my kind of current point?
I remember, like, if we take it all the way back to the beginning, like I was actively on a Dutch forum, a Dutch poker forum, and I messaged anyone who was sort of a regular poster. I would say, hey man, I'm recording my sessions, let's go review it. And I remember, like, there were a couple guys who replied, and guess what? You know, we all ended up becoming successful in poker. Then afterwards, I moved to Malta in a house with 4 poker players. So, you know, that's just poker and FIFA nonstop. That was basically all that we were doing. And then you just keep on chatting. And then actually, I remember at some point, I was actively studying just with one guy, but I wasn't living anymore with poker players. And that's actually also, I think, when I kind of plateaued. And then later in my career, you know, when I moved back actually to the Netherlands, I started an office, teamed up again with 3 guys in one office, and then it's just poker nonstop. And then, yeah, I think I've told before, right, that one guy, Flores, he really installed that mindset of, hey, guys, we're going to try to become the best. And that's when, like, necessity rises, right? Like, oh, the best. Huh. Okay, well, let's try that. Okay, what would people do if they are really trying to become the best? And then you're like, well, let's think. Well, maybe we should optimize it. Maybe we should optimize that. Oh, maybe we should study better. Oh, then you start to think creatively in terms of how to get there. And then when you have that road, I remember I had like a little roadmap on my wall next to where I was sitting. It's like, okay, I'm here now and I'm trying to go there. And every month I would put like a dot of where I am now, right? And then next to it, I even photoshopped myself in a table with like the legends at that time, where it's like, listen, and I put that there as well. Okay, that's the table where I want to sit in like a year or something, right? And I would just keep track every month. Every month I would kind of do what Armin also said. Remember, I had a big whiteboard to write down all the stats that I had currently and to where I wanted that to go. And this is like 8 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. So it was pretty ahead of the time, I'm pretty sure. So we were striving towards that stats, and those were stats that I thought were good, right? We didn't have the GTO numbers or anything, but these were the stats that I thought would be good to have. And yeah, man, then exactly what Armin said. Every day, show up, study, grind. But it's really how you do, because I'm sure a lot of audience are listening like, every day show up, I grind, I review my hands. But it's how. I think Armin showed definitely, for example, a lot of people probably using a solver nowadays, but I feel like how Armin shared that he uses a solver is definitely already way different than a lot of the audience listening. And also when he plays that he marks 30, 40 hands, you know, it's also different than other people who are, oh, I set the goal of trying to play 2,000 hands, or I have to play 50,000 hands this month because I need to make certain hourly. I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, Armin, but you were not really busy about the hourly you were making at 100 NL or 200 NL Blitz. You were there put practice in because you had a higher goal, correct?
Yeah, I never really set win rate or like profit goals for myself.
No, because you were not interested in grinding around and seeing if 200 Blitz was a great pool to grind around the rest of your career. It was just, no, I'm here to implement this stuff because I'm trying to get there, right?
I had to turn into a man.
Exactly. You had to turn into a man, right? So I guess the advice for a lot of the audience today was a podcast about how to turn into a man, right?
Yeah.
Our audience is gonna turn from boys into men.
It's something that I kind of wanted to touch on is like you said, maybe should I network or something? That's something that I wasn't really good with at all. My friends kind of my one friend, his name is Daniel. He kind of did the networking for me. He's very good at networking. He'd talk in Discords a lot. He'd go play live and meet other people playing live. Interesting story. So I think we all played Call of Duty, and he went and played a tournament at the lodge, and he saw a professional Call of Duty player there, and his name was Steven Diabolic, and he was like, no, and then he was the Diabolic, or Steven, was playing Bovada 2KNL on his phone, and my friend goes up to him and says, are you sure you're even winning in that game? Because he's playing at a live table, so like usually live players playing at a live table aren't going to win at 2K online. And then he's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. And then they kind of connected. They talked about Call of Duty, and then I started playing Call of Duty with him. And then he was friends with other poker players who had the CFP that now I'm currently a part of. And now we're all really good friends. We all started playing video games with each other, and now I work with them. And, you know, that sometimes it's all up to chance. If you're not good at networking, be friends with someone who is. All right?
Yeah,
So
and
then-
you know,
then
you
you
got
can
to
kinda
put
win.
yourself out there. Like I said, I was just shooting messages at people who were actively on forums, you know. And nowadays, just try to reach out to people. And especially in the beginning, you know, you might have to give a little bit more, and then until you find the right people. But yeah, I can definitely say that all my best times in poker and the times that I've been at the top of my game and evolved the most was always when I was very working closely around and daily around other guys that were all going in the same direction. So yeah, if you don't have that currently, find a way to get that. I would say, yeah, definitely make that your priority. What are you currently working on, Armin, in terms of, you know, you said that you're trying to become the best. What is still missing in the gap? What do you have to improve on?
It's funny, like, I think 2 years ago, maybe it was start of 2023, maybe it started 2024. I was like, all right, I'm going to put most of my focus on small pots. And honestly, since then, it's just mainly been that. And I think there's always room to improve in small pots, because I focused on big pots for so long, because those are the pots that are going to sit with you the most, because they're the ones that get you the most emotional. You have the most attachment to the big ones that you lose or the big ones that you win. Those are the ones you'll remember the most often. But I mean, I just continue my focus on that. And then honestly, with playing the Cash Game World Championship, there's something that I realized I didn't have as much experience as I needed, was like deep stack stuff, right? Because once you're sitting there playing for hours and hours, you're going to get pretty deep with players, beating 200 blinds, 300 blinds, 400 blinds deep with people. In my case, I was 500 big blinds deep with someone, and I got stacked for all of this. But that's a part of my game that I was probably lacking.
You said that earlier in the conversation that in a format like that, the championship, if you have certain leaks, these opponents, they will point you out. Did you notice that as well when you got deep stacked? And do you maybe have an example of where, like, maybe I'm getting owned here because I lacked my deep stacked experience, or I lack a clear strategy?
There was one hand, like, you know, even when you aren't studied, you still have a lot of experience in a lot of other spots, so you can kind of relate it. So I did play quite a few deep stack pots. I actually played a lot of them pretty well, but you know, that might have been because I had the hand I knew how to play well, right? Rather than parts of my range that I was missing. There was one hand I played versus Linus that he 4-bet me, and I, made a call that was fine. And he c-bets, and I just check shove the flop. When maybe it made more sense to like check small raise, and it doesn't sound like that big of a deal. And honestly, like, it's not that big of a deal EV wise, but when you think about your range as a whole, there's a lot of things that you could do to improve the EV of each hand, or the range, I guess. And that's something that I just said, I didn't really consider some of these things, and that's something that I need to look at. And a lack of experience is always going to be something whenever you're just trying something new. In this case, it was kind of more deep stack stuff for me. And yeah, I guess I check shoved, and then I didn't really think about it at the time. I'm like, oh, this is fine. I have value, I have bluffs, but the equity of like the hands I had versus the hands he had, I didn't really consider his range as much as I needed to. So I kind of had a lapse in my thought process that I usually wouldn't if I was more familiar with the spot.
So the process of improving that, same as what we discussed. Dive into the solver, build a strategy, test that strategy, see how your opponent responds, choose the strategy that you execute best and that he performs or responds against poorly.
You're going to get a lot of the same answer out of me. It's a lot of rinse repeat with my study process and how I like to get better.
Perfect. It was just trying to align, so that means that we've covered it all, right? So that there are,
studying goes,
yeah,
probably.
We sometimes get angry messages. I see sometimes a comment like, "Oh, you had this great guy on, but I learned nothing." I was like, "Okay, guys, I'm really trying here, right? I'm trying to squeeze everything out of these guests." Okay. How do you see the future of poker, and how do you see yourself in it?
I think poker is getting harder as a whole because it's so much easier to get better nowadays. Because I think 2, 3, 4 years ago, you couldn't just load up a cloud-based solver and have a single raise pot loaded up right in front of you in the span of 10 seconds. You'd have to run a Pio solver sim. Your computer would need to have enough RAM, and it would take 30 minutes, an hour maybe to run. You'd have to sit there and wait. And you couldn't cover much, right? You'd have to cover a single spot. So now you have access to every spot in poker pretty much immediately. So everyone's getting better. The edges are getting smaller. And although you still can carve out an edge at the top and versus the better players, everything's getting more and more competitive. So it's going to become definitely harder. How I see myself in it. I see myself doing fine as long as I keep on working. Like, people are going to catch up, and the only way to keep them from catching up is sharpening my tools.
Any live poker ambitions?
I've probably played like 40 to 50 hours of lifetime. And I think it's fun, but I only ever go and play live if my friends are doing it. And even then, I don't go all that often. I've had good experiences live. I think it's fun to socialize at the table. It's a different aspect because you don't really get to do that online.
What would you like the main takeaway to be the audience gets from the conversation we had today?
The main takeaway. Well, I would say I had a very simple approach as I just put my head down and kept on working, but I don't think that was the most efficient way. Like, I think I could have definitely reached out to other people sooner. I waited quite a long time before I tried other opinions. And, I did plateau, and that's a part of everyone's poker careers. But maybe I wouldn't have plateaued for as long if I was more open-minded. So, like, whether it was get coaching from this guy, or maybe do a trial run in a CFP, or, open up a course. I mean, that was a question I was asked, is like, oh, have you looked at courses? And I said, not really. I never really looked at a course. I looked at one video of one course one time. And other than that, I kind of just figured stuff out. on my own, and it probably would take a lot more time than it needed to. So I would say focus on efficiency.
Great conversation, Armin. Thank you for sharing a bunch of wisdom with us and the audience. Adam, main takeaways?
So many to reflect on. I'm going to start with the area that he thought he wasn't very good with, which was mindset. And I'm sure myself, you, Rene, and the audience listening will be like, actually, this guy's got a really good mindset, a really strong mindset for poker. And he's got a lot of things that he's doing very well. One thing I really liked was this setting expectations and accepting losses before you start a session. He mentioned this before going into the Coinpoker Championships, that he really wanted to be okay with losing. It's as good as gone, I think he said, as he sits down to play. And that mindset's really important. It becomes more important as your shot taking higher stakes because you don't have a sample, the money gets a bit scary. So you got to really align those expectations, not get too excited, and to rebalance that by accepting that you could lose that money. Easier said than done, I'm aware of, but it's something to really strive towards. He also was able to focus on what he controls. He doesn't get too down on results. He doesn't really care that he's losing because he mentions, I'm confident I'm going to win it back over the long term. Again, like zooming out, he mentioned zooming out, like physically zooming out from his graph to see a bigger lens and having confidence in himself that he's going to figure this thing out and get better at poker. And then that leads to the second one I wrote down, which was work ethic and why he's got so much confidence. He mentioned like no glamour, no sugarcoating, how to get to where he got to. You've got to put in the effort, put in the work, keep showing up, and you've got to always be improving. He talked about always marking hands, always trying to look for small details. He said early in his career, he had big leaks, so he could look at the big stuff. But now he's looking at small details, small stats, small bits of information. And when I pushed him on this, it wasn't something that came naturally to begin with. He realized that he needed to pay more attention to these areas. So he almost like intentionally got himself to tag lots of these hands so he would learn them. So always be learning, always be curious, trying to find those details and really care about getting better. And alongside that, you've got to have something to strive towards. His goal was always to be the best. So if you've got the goal to be the best, everything needs to line up with that. If your goal is just to make a living or to have low expectations for yourself, then you don't need to be as full on, but you've still got to align the work ethic with the actual objective. And then the third one I wrote was handling emotions and staying calm under pressure. It was an interesting conversation with you and Rene and Armin, where they basically went back and forth on how they experience feelings in the body and how that affects the mind. I think with Armin, what he's very good at is experiencing things like nerves, things like adrenaline in the body, and still feeling fine with it, being okay with it, riding that kind of emotional response and not letting the mind get too active. That is a very hard skill to learn. I can tell you from experience of working with hundreds of poker players, that is not a skill that comes naturally. Most players are very active mentally, emotions and mind interconnect really strongly. If you feel in your body a certain high energy emotion, the mind can freak out very quickly. He seems to have a natural talent, I'd say, towards understanding that, but also he's worked on staying in control of those responses. And as he mentioned, when his friend walks in the room, he looks like he's very animated, but the mind is calm throughout that process, or at least it's engaged, and he's not letting the emotional response play out in a negative way. So I think that's a skill a lot of players need to work on actively. They need to work on keeping the mind calm as the body's freaking out, but also just being aware of what your body's experiencing. Because very often the body feels a sensation, the mind reacts. It's like impulse. It's like, oh, don't like this, push away. You got to be very in tune, build emotional awareness of what you experience and practice keeping the mind calm. Even things like going in a cold ice bath, very good at training this skill, because you go in the cold water, the mind instantly freaks out. You've got to remind the mind, get in tune with the body and keeping the mind calm. Lots of practice of keeping the mind calm in these heightened states. Over time, you realize, oh, I can handle this. I'm okay with it. So though it came natural to Amin, most of us need to work on that. So yeah, just a caveat there from that one. But yeah, those are the main ones. How about yourself, Rene? What are the main takeaways?
Yeah, it was funny that on the tweet that I found him, right, where he shared his result, and the guy was like, and he gave the advice, yeah, you know, no secrets. He just said, yeah, you just got to show up, be consistent, hard work, right? But it's how he showed up, right? You also mentioned it. Yeah, okay, he showed up every day and he said, I just play. But I'm pretty sure that if we look at how he was playing, that was different than someone else was showing up, right? And he had that bigger goal. He was not using 200 and blitz to grind 50K to make an hourly, right? He was not busy making money right now. He was busy, fuck, I have to figure this game out. I have to improve because I want to go there. This is just a stop, right? Whereas I think a lot of players, they get stuck. They're like, they're calculating the hourly. Oh, I can actually make a living of this. Also, there was, from what I understood, there was like no financial pressure, where I think a lot of the guys maybe at mid stakes, they maybe already do this for a living and they have to pay the bills. So it's a very different minds in terms of environment that he was trying to get good at poker in, and that maybe some of our audience tries to get good at poker in. So maybe they also try to set up your environment in a way that you can approach it a bit more like Armin did. In terms of technical, I wrote down a bunch of things. I'm sure I'm not going to cover it all. I think he shared actually a lot of different angles than what we were used to in the pod. So definitely would recommend listening back to some of his wisdom. He wrote down small pots. He was very big on the small pots, right? And he said being aggressive. These were the two basically number one things in poker that are very important. I think we can then kind of put those two together and say be aggressive in the small pots. Hey, got we kind of merge those two advice. Also in terms of how, because a lot of players, I'm sure they also mark hands and they go to the solver, but he never really talked about looking up a hand in the solver. He was always way more curious, like, how does my range play in this scenario? What's the strategy in this scenario? That's every time where his mind went towards, instead of what does my hand have to do, right? So also how he used the solver, he kept on talking about node locking, node locking, node locking. Well, I'm sure that some of our audience are listening. They just look up hands in the solver and they try to want to know if they played their hand correctly. That's not what he's using the solver for, right? He's using the solver to test, right? He said that he likes to play devil's advocate, test by using the solver. So he put his strategies in. And also in terms of using the strategies to actually build strategies, right? And the way he came up with the strategy that he decided to choose, he tested like some ideas. Okay, we can play big bet, we can play small bet, we can play a mix, we can play range check, range bet. And then he would be like, okay, which one can I execute to the closest accuracy, right? That loses close to 0 EV. That was kind of what he was striving for. And then he would look at the responses of all the strategies he could choose. And then he would look, okay, which one is my opponent most likely to screw up against? And then based on these two things, he would then pick the baseline strategy that he would choose in that scenario. Now, that doesn't mean that he will just always blindly execute the strategy. I'm sure he will make some adjustments based on reads that he will get there, but at least it's a great place to start from, right? And when going through the solvers, he was really focused on why, but also how. And the how was like making it practical. And that's also when we started to dive a bit more into simplification, which I'm actually very glad we touched on the topic, because I feel like it's a very misunderstood topic. Everyone nowadays just talks about simplification, and then they think they should just range c-bet every board for 1/3. Well, that was not at all what Armin was doing. And I think also what's simple kind of changes, right? Based on basically in a strategy building process, actually it makes a lot of sense that you might come to that conclusion, because that's the strategy you could execute at a high accuracy. And that could also be the strategy that your opponent has the toughest time playing against. So, and then naturally, when you get better and you move up the stakes, it's only normal that your strategy becomes a bit more, let's say, complicated, but still not unnecessarily complex. He also touched on when he made a mistake. It almost seems like he never makes a mistake twice. Did you notice that as well, Adam? He said like, yeah, when I make a mistake, I just look at what my thought process was, I find the hole, and I replace that hole by something that was better, and then I don't make the mistake anymore. So when you make a mistake, try to really remember and write down what your thought process was and what kind of, maybe also what's the correction to that, or what threw you off, right? Often I think it's also an emotion that could have thrown you off your thought process. So that's something, I guess, that's also something to work on. And last but not least, I wrote down here how he improves. He likes to review his database, right? He reviews his stats. And then his stats point him in the direction of certain leagues, because he kind of know what the GTO would look like, or at least his GTO and the strategy that he has built. And then that points him in a spot where he apparently is not accurate. So then that's the spot that he's going to work on, which is definitely a process that I apply as well and would recommend our audience to apply as well. Okay, this was a lot of wisdom in an episode. I'm very happy that Armin came here and shared this all with us. I want to thank Adam. I want to thank our audience. If you liked this episode, leave a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ever episode, which is going to be great as well. Shout out to our sponsors again, GTO Wizard and Coinpoker. And remember, if you want to make more progress in your poker career, if you want to team up with me and Adam, we have spots open in our Mechanics of Poker program. If you want to know more about that, go over to mechanicsofpoker.com or use the link down below to apply. And I will see you guys in the next episode.